Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 2026 DRC meeting. DRC is a subcommittee of the Historic Zoning Commission. Meeting is informal and designed to guide applicants through the process of obtaining a certificate of appropriateness or a COA for projects within the city's historic districts in light of the Historic District Design Guidelines. Applicant participation in DRC meetings is voluntary but highly recommended. Changes made or suggestions taken by the applicant based on discussions with the DRC are the applicant's choice. But DRC makes no representation as to whether any changes or suggestions made during this meeting will be approved by the voting body, the Historic Zoning Commission. We have 7 items on this afternoon's agenda. The items called, please introduce yourself and generally describe your item in about 2 to 3 minutes. First up, item number 1, discussion of window alterations at 334 Main Street, Suite 104. Jenna Lee is the applicant. If you all want to come on up. Neither one of you are Jenna, but I know Michael. All right, go ahead and give us an overview of what your project is, please. Give us an overview of what your project is.
Okay, as you're seeing in the picture in front of you, I'm not sure exactly what period that was done, but the original 6/6 windows were replaced by clear pane windows. Does it have a date on it? I think it was in the mid-90s. It was a big mistake, and the owner of the building's trying to take it back to the picture you're showing right now, which is how every other window on that street that's like that is. And so we're going to do 6/6 and put them in there and install them and bring it back like it should be. The windows on the existing building are just clear pane. They were a mistake, and they've deteriorated to the point where some of them are profusely leaking.
Okay. Anything else you want to add? Not right now? Okay, let's hear from staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The building at 334 Main Street is in the downtown Franklin National Register Historic District. The building was altered, believed to be in the 1990s, to have windows without a light pattern. The application includes historic images of the building with a divided light pattern for the windows that will be custom made to match the historic windows. The proposal aligns with the guidelines as the building is being restored using photographic evidence. Thank you.
Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, anyone want to ask any questions or have any comments? Brian, go ahead.
I'll just start it. That's great. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've walked down that street waiting for the day this happens.
Me too.
So
I was
this-
glad to be
this
the
is
one that gets the
excellent.
call.
I
And
feel that way too.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's really gonna help. The upper stories generally tell the story because they're undisturbed, and this is a building that needs to tell that
and
story.
it's very prominent too. It'll really be a facelift to that part of Main Street.
Thank you.
So agree, yes.
Kathy?
Is it what type of window is it?
Well, they're what they call, they're to mimic the windows that were there. They're 6/6. The difference is that since there's so much air fumes from the vehicles on the street, that they will not open and shut. They look like, they look like that, so they're true windows. And we're making them out of, they call an African mahogany, so they probably have like a 200-year shelf life on them or something.
And your profile is a deeper historical profile?
Profile's historic profile, matching the existing,
Okay,
what was there.
great, thank you.
So are you looking at sapele? Is that what you're thinking?
Say that again.
Sapele, is that the type? Are you going something different? You said African mahogany.
Yeah, African mahogany. There was heart poplar there, but you can't get heart poplar anymore, and they're paint grade, so nobody will know the difference.
Yeah.
We gave them 2 options to go with the poplar, which would probably have maybe a 50 or 75-year shelf life, or the mahogany, which has a 200-year shelf life, and they chose that. There's a second part to talk about, too. I guess we'll get to that, Emily, about the copper. Is that on? That wasn't on our submission. Was it on there?
It wasn't included, just the windows were included.
And we can come back on that if we need to, but what I wanted to point out now, if you look at there's a little eyebrow above both of the shops. Those little eyebrows right there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the one over what they call the tin cottage, you can see that it's very deteriorated and rotting, and it's got a lot of like where it's fallen in and stuff. So as part of this, we were going to rebuild that. And the other side of the House of Spirits has been more maintained, so it's better. But they're requesting, and you can't barely see it from this, you can't see what the covering is, but they'd like to put copper on those eyebrows up there to just take it back to how it should be.
Right now, it's just the EPDM
Yes.
over top of the House of Spirits, and then it's like a painted metal over top of the tin cottage.
Okay. Any thoughts on that, anybody?
It's not a visual.
So you won't see the copper? What will you
Not
see?
unless you're upstairs looking out the window.
So what will you see?
Well, let's go back to the picture and see what you see right now. So over the House of Spirits, there's EDPM, but all you can see is the crown. You can't see over the top of it.
That side's EPDM, so it's black, and then this side's like a painted metal on top.
If it did, but I doubt if you approved the EDPM on it at that time. It's probably, 10 or 15, prior owner to the building.
Okay. Now, are you making, you're going to make all the windows yourself, or are you getting them from somewhere?
We have a small mill shop we work with. It's
Okay.
just a two-man mill shop, and he
Make
does a
'em.
lot of
Okay.
our work. He'll make them.
Good. Yeah, typically we see some window specs when you come for your actual COA. So if there's a section drawing or anything that kind of shows us how it's
You'd
put
like some
together.
a shop drawing or something, Tyler?
Usually there's some type of specifications provided when it's like one of the big manufacturers. So if
Most
there's
of the
a
shops we
drawing-
work with are, well, we do a lot with him, but a lot of shops are larger shops, they provide a drawing, but
Yeah.
we can provide
Yeah.
enough of a drawing for you guys to
yeah,
see what it is.
even if it's just what your bottom rail might be and
Yeah,
some just-
dimensions and
yeah, just
dimensions
some
and
simple
sizes.
things
I
think
know
would be
what you
interesting.
want, and I
Okay.
can get it to you.
I don't have an issue with the copper necessarily. There's going to be some kind of terminal extent that it can go up because of the windowsill. So it's not going to be that tall, and it'll bronze out over time. And
It's more about durability than visual, though. There's really not it's not being requested because of a visual look. It's being requested because, like putting mahogany in the windows, it gives it more of like the EDPM has like a 10-year shelf life on it or something,
Yeah.
and this has, or a 20-year at the most, and this has 150 or something. Copper's the best covering it could get.
And you won't see it.
You won't see it, except if you're upstairs
Yeah,
looking out.
looking down.
yeah, across the street or something up
Yeah.
high. Okay. Any other thoughts, Kathy?
Emily, can I ask you to pull up the picture with the other historical windows in it? Okay. Yo, what do you think that roof material was?
And there's 3 or 4 other buildings with the elevations you can see right next door, and they're all the same. This is the only one that's wrong on the street right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that looks like it's something leaching down the front. It might be copper. Those little streaks.
That looks like tar to me.
Well, I do think some of the windows on that street, they look aluminum clad to me. They're not historic. Some of the ones are actually next to it. I think across the street, there may be some historic ones. So if you're going to, replicate, I would look to see what those look like dimensions-wise, and that way you can replicate that on this building. But they have the arches too. But they're 4/4. This had the 6/6. That's more appropriate. What you're proposing.
One other question
ahead.
too, and have you verified that you can make them non-operable from a code compliance?
Well, it would add a lot more expense, and there's no reason to open them because it just lets the fumes in, and nobody ever opens those windows up there. It just sucks all the carbon monoxide in, so. And as far as codes go, they're meeting they have nothing to do with egress. We've met all our egress on other doors and stuff, so there's no reason to have them be operable. It would probably add about 50% to I think the contract price is about 120 grand. It would probably add about 30 or 40,000 to try to make them operable.
So if they're non-operable, are you going to make them look operable?
Yes, absolutely. You will not be able to tell from the street at all.
Should look like fixed double hungs.
Yes.
So, okay.
They'll have that wide middle
that
rail
answer your
like an
question?
operable window would have. They're an exact replica of an operable window.
So there will be two sashes. They just won't function as
That's
but
correct.
you can open.
That's correct. yeah.
So if in the future somebody wanted to try to make them into functional,
They could just pop the sashes out, put tracks in,
Yeah.
make it work like
Okay,
that.
thank you.
Anything else, anybody? Okay. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Okay. Item number 2, discussion of site alterations, ramp at 210 3rd Avenue North. Brandon Pretty. Getting one of his comrades here.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, my name's Aaron Rogers with 906 Studio.
Okay, Mr. Rogers,
And
give
I
us.
have, we've brought this project to you a couple different times and have secured a COA for a majority of the renovation. This is at 210 3rd Avenue North. And one of the unresolved items was the accessible ramp. And there was concern about placing it at the front of the house and how it would impact the facade. And so we understand this concern by the commission, and we wanted to look into this and study the alternative locations that were brought up for the ramp at either the north or the south sides of the home or at the back of the house. And so we prepared some exhibits showing why those options are not feasible due to various site constraints. So we wanted to illustrate those as best we could and kind of talk through the different options and why we still feel the front option is the best option for that ramp location.
Okay, let's hear from. You want to walk us through these options real
Sure.
quick?
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you're
do
ready.
that.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
because I think Emily will have comments, kind of on the options, but I
Sure.
don't know that she wants to
So
knows all the ins and outs of the what constraints you're referring to.
yeah, definitely. So option one is positioning an ADA ramp on the north side of the house. And a ramp to the north of the building would obstruct the shared access easement that exists between the neighboring properties, so they share a driveway. And it is also within the setback as well. So it's just, we don't have the room to locate it on that side where it could come up the side of the house and then possibly enter in or even transition the front of the facade. You're still going to have to probably cross the facade to get in. So, but just basically those constraints alone keep us from being able to position the ramp there.
Okay.
And then option two looks at the opposite side, the south side of the home. And there we're up against similar constraints. The setback, the ramp would sit within that. And would also, so it would be conflict with the minimum 5-foot setback off the lot line as required by zoning. There's also some constraints with the existing monument sign that we're hoping to restore, and some other site features that make it difficult to locate a ramp there. And option three looks at locating the ramp at the rear of the home. And unfortunately, there's not adequate room between the rear of the building and the setback to fit a ramp at the length necessary with the landings and slope as outlined in ADA requirements. So basically, we have, you can see with the stairway that exists there, we have roughly 42 inches of drop, which would necessitate roughly 42 feet of ramp. So you could see the switchback that would be required to create that ramp. It's also located within the setback, and any opportunity for an accessible parking space would be taken up by the ramp at that point. Option four is an alternative to our original option of placing the ramp at the front of the house. After looking into this a little more closely, there are some additional constraints. There's actually a water meter that sits next to the monument sign, so we don't think that this would be as viable as we did originally. I don't think we'd be able to get the height that we need for the ramp and keep it at a low enough slope to not have to have handrails and guardrails. So I think this one, we could look into it further, but I don't think this one would be viable, which brings us back to option 5 on the next slide. And this is the one we brought to you previously. This provides a switchback, low slope, 1 to 20 ramp, no handrail or guardrail would be required. And it provides some landscaping at the front of it, up against the existing paver sidewalk, and then a small landscaping strip in between the two sections of ramp. It would give us enough room for the landing and keep it as low profile as possible. And we feel that with the existing foundation that you can see, there's kind of a rubble foundation existing on the front facade there. Really, it wouldn't go up any higher than that. So we feel the impact to the facade would be pretty minimal.
What's the front porch to grade is how much? How many inches?
Yeah, we're looking at right around 12 inches.
Okay. So you're looking for 12 feet of run on the front and 40 something in the back.
Correct.
Okay. All right, let's hear from Emily here. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The building at 210 3rd Avenue North is in the downtown Franklin National Register Historic District. The proposal is to install a ramp on the building. The proposal previously came before a Historic Zoning Commission meeting where it was denied. There are 5 options that have been included within the application. The guidelines recommend placing ramps and lifts on rear or side facades where not readily visible. A project consideration was provided during the review that if the ramp encroaches more than what is allowed by the zoning ordinance, a variance would be required before staff can approve it. Thank you.
Okay. So that in that last comment was for if the ramp were located past a setback, basically. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Any thoughts, anybody?
I have one,
Kathy?
Mr. Chair.
Okay, Kathy.
Considering, I appreciate these 5 options, and thank you for the drawings to help us see what you're dealing with. And the ramp in the back was definitely too massive, but I understand now because of the slope of the property. The front is the lowest amount of slope. Have you considered a lift versus a ramp?
We haven't at the front of the home, or I think we have talked about it. I know that's going to be more cost for the lift, and potentially, I don't know where we would locate that, in a way that wouldn't impact the home. Yeah, that's,
I just asked because we've had a previous applicant that wanted to do the very same thing. And it was a much more difficult lot than yours, so they had a greater height to accomplish. But they ended up doing a lift under one of the covered carport areas of it, and their justification basically was it was less obtrusive and they didn't have that much usage of it. So it didn't eat up a parking spot for the handicap as well. So actually it was right next to it. So it was a perfect little gem. So I just thought I'd ask if you had investigated that. And
yeah, we haven't taken a deep dive into that, but our preference would be for the ramp if we, ideally.
I will say too, because of it's only 12-inch overall height you're accomplishing, not having the guardrail is a tremendous insignificant feature to it. So it does remain low and non-really rampy.
Exactly. And I think, especially once it's landscaped, you really wouldn't see much of that ramp from head-on to the house.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the additional information. It helps us see what the limitations are. And going for the ramp, I think your option is at number 5 or number 4?
Number 5, I believe, is.
Number
yes,
5,
that's
I mean,
right. Yeah.
it seems to be what would work best for the requirement of the ADA ramp. I did have a question, though, about how you've got a platform where your ramp terminates into and then the porch.
Correct.
So how are you going to address how you transition that into a wooden, I'm assuming right now it has a wooden tongue and groove porch.
It does.
How do you address that in that transition?
Yeah, we need to look at that a little bit closer on transition, if we had some kind of transition threshold or something that would bridge those two in a way that was clean. Or
So
maybe
the ramp and the platform are concrete, that's what's being proposed.
that's
and
what
then
we're proposing.
To
right?
a wooden porch.
Correct. Yeah. And we'd want to make sure that that was a clean transition, or maybe it's something where the wood porch is extended and then, but the ramp would need to be concrete. Our preference would be for the concrete at the upper landing as well, and then transition to the existing porch. It's going to be restored.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That was going to be my question too, is how, when you go up the ramp, how it transitions in. But then also, on the street side of the ramp, where it begins, is there going to be landscaping there as well?
There is. There's a small strip between the pavers and the down arrow that you see there, and that would be landscaped there, and then over to your left, correct?
And then what?
Oh, both of those would have landscaping
Okay.
up against the house, and then there's a center island in between the two slopes of the ramp.
Right.
And then a small strip up against the paver sidewalk. So
Okay.
there'd be some different opportunities for landscaping there.
Okay, great.
Can I ask you a
Oh, yeah.
question? So I don't think the ramp looks terrible at all. I think it looks okay, but if it's only 12 inches, I'm just wondering, does it have to be doubling back? Like, is there a way to make it so there's like shrubbery or something right in front of the house, and then the ramp isn't even necessarily right up to it, and like a sidewalk almost, that just kind of goes?
A single slope?
Yeah,
Is that what-
is that too much, too tall for a single slope?
Unfortunately, at that low slope, to keep us from having handrails and guardrails, we have to have the switchback run. So
Mm-hmm. Oh, so-
if we went to a single slope, it'd be a little bit steeper, which would then bring us into the grading that would require handrails and
Okay.
guardrails. So,
Okay, thanks.
yeah, so unfortunately, I don't think we can shorten that up at all and keep that low slope. Yeah, I think that's, we showed it as small as we can go lengthwise.
Okay.
So on your question about this option one here, I'm trying to decipher what all these metrics on the, I guess that's the north side. We've got 17 feet shared access, and there's a 5-foot setback. I mean, I'm realizing that, well, if you do get a ramp on that side of the building, where does it go? You're going to enter in one of the rooms or something. It just doesn't land at a good
Correct.
spot necessarily. But I still want to understand, it looks like if there's a 5-foot setback, then you've got another 5 or 6 feet to the building. And that would, if you have a, whatever, 40-inch, 42-inch ramp or whatever, some variation thereof, you've still got,
Our-
14-foot drive aisle, or am I not understanding?
Yeah, 17's the full width, so is it 17? Sorry, I have mine. Yeah, so we have 17-foot drive aisle, so 18.6 to the center, to the property line at the center of that. So then with our 5-foot setback, we're left with 3.5 feet. And then the landing has to be a 5x5 if we have that, so that's encroaching on it. So it just makes it really tight to get access back there as well. And plus, part of it would be sitting over that setback line.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know that it helps to put it over there, and and I think we're losing grade too. So the ramp just gets longer the further we go
It
too.
does,
So it's just
yeah.
insult to injury on that side. Okay, I just wanted to understand the numbers a little better.
That's good.
There's sort of space over there to use, and you could make the landing spill out the back or the front, but then that's as bad as any other.
Yeah.
Having a 5x5 landing on a corner is probably not ideal either. So, okay. Any other comments? Anybody, Kathy?
Looking at option 3, where you did put the ramp in the back, and you're having it go into the brown highlighted section of the building, is that another means of egress out of the building?
That's correct. We have a breezeway that connects the building to the accessory piece, and that's then connects to a rear entry to the building.
Okay. Could there be an option to do lift and a step up to that rear entry? then behind the building, it's just a lift.
We need to look at that.
It could be covered and protected, and you could put a parking spot back there instead of this triple dandy ramparoo.
Yeah. I think that being the back of the law office, kind of the back of house, the more
Yeah.
private part of their operation, I don't know that they'd want to have that circulation path for people coming in through the back. You know, ideally, it would all come through the front where they have the reception and the waiting area. Also for security, that might be a challenge as well, keeping that door unlocked all the time.
Yeah,
So,
not knowing the usage and, how you're
Sure.
dealing with the inside, but just, since you did look at an option of a ramp going back there, you thought,
Yeah.
well, we'll try the back and let us see. I thought I'd just mention that.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to at least take one more look at the lift.
okay, yeah, we can take a look at that. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Take a look and see if there's, let's exhaust all the options, because if we're gonna consider going kind of against what our guidelines say, which this isn't supposed to be in the front at all, then we need to make sure we can, as a board, say, we looked at all of their options. There weren't really any other ones that made any sense, including that one with the lift. So, exhaust everything just so that we have all the information that we could possibly consider. I think that's helps us to make a good decision. Anything else, anybody?
Well, if it does end up being in the front, I really think that an emphasis on the landscaping is going to be really important
Great.
to maintain the character of the house and everything that you're trying to accomplish. It's very important,
Yeah, I agree.
if that's where it has to be. I know that's not our purview, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying.
I agree. Okay. Anything else, anybody? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Okay, let's move to item number 3, discussion of new construction, signage, and site alterations. Williamson County EMS at 110 Aldersgate Way. Lacey Fuller. And,
Jeff Airwood.
okay, if you want to give us an update on what has changed, and then we'll hear from staff.
Yes. So we went back to the comments from historic zoning, implemented those in lowering the water table. We did keep it higher at the bays just from a durability standpoint. A lot of washing of trucks and things out there where a lower water table might be detrimental to the material. But at the living quarters, lowered it to be more traditional foundation height, lowered the roof on the living quarters section to kind of close that gap between the head of the windows and the eaves. Went back with, all the window types are the same. I think previously we had kind of a double window smashed together there in the front, so we've separated those some. Six light, true divided light, top and bottom is the intent. The rendering is a little finicky. I know it's showing 2 colors of doors. That's not the intent. The doors will be the same color as the front door. Just had a little glitch there. And then just included some more content to kind of give examples of what, trim, different things are going to look like, colors of the roof, things of that nature.
Okay. Thank you for that. Let's hear from staff.
So the proposed construction, signage, and site alterations are proposed at 110 Aldersgate Way, which is on the edge of the historic preservation overlay on Mac Hatcher, but it is located in the Franklin Road Historic District. The proposal recently came before the Historic Zoning Commission at the April meeting, where it was deferred to the May meeting. The applicant has incorporated the feedback from the meeting and has refined the plan based on the feedback. The plan reflects a lowered water course, trim around the windows, updated window design, and an updated door design. The application includes that a cementitious siding will be used. The guidelines recommend using a smooth siding, and it is suggested to use a 4 to 5 inch reveal. While the design of the window has been updated, the material of the window should match the historic materials traditionally found in historic civic buildings, and composite materials that have the appearance of wood are appropriate for windows, stops, jambs, and trim. Windows are recommended to not have snap-on mullions, And trim has been added surrounding the windows, but it is suggested to also add trim around the doors to have a traditional appearance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's hear from some commissioners. Holly, go ahead.
I actually think that it looked better before, and it's looking a little bit boring now. Just, mentioned that I liked it before, and so I just think that from my perspective, we want it to be historic, but also not just take away everything interesting and make it completely generic. So I liked what you had before, especially around the door. I think it's a little boring.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you for considering the recommendations of the commission. The lowered head heights give a more historic feel to the building as well. The lowered water table, I think that's the way you've left it with a higher water table on the main building and then on the living quarters. I think it differentiates the buildings. I think that's a nice touch. Staff has recommended the either 4.5 or 5-inch reveal. Does that work with you?
Yes.
Okay. I noticed too, I don't see any corner boards. Will the building have corner boards, or will it come together at some kind of miter? I mean, how are you going to
Yeah.
address that?
Yeah, corner boards, and at the pace we're having to move to design an entire building here, in the time that we have between historic zoning and the deadline for design review committee, we've only got enough time. We have about 36 hours to get something in. So we got in quickly what we could. We're at kind of the design development stage of this, and so I'm kind of starting to wonder. I think it's good. It's helpful to come to the DRC meetings each time. We've got probably 2 more months of detailing and putting this building together, because it's not just a window replacement or a roof replacement like what y'all are seeing a lot more in the historic district. So I'm thinking, that's a great comment, and it's something that would have evolved as we continue to detail the building. We would do a detail of that corner and have a 3-to-1 detail for a contractor to properly put that together. So as we start to put those pieces in, I think the renderings, the elevations are going to change. So, yes, the corners will have some sort of treatment. I think, to your point about the front door, it probably would have evolved to have some more trim in it at that stage of development of the document. So yes, to answer your question. But then just kind of keeping that in mind is if there's any additional comments, similar that are details that will evolve eventually as we progress the documents over the next 2 or 3 months to create a bid set to put the building together. So, but design intent-wise, it's been very valuable to get the feedback so far, because we otherwise may not have lowered the roof and things of that, so, yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Angela?
Well, I think this is wonderful that you've responded so well to, the suggestions and conversations that we've had. And I do think that this is moving in a really nice direction that is not obtrusive on the site, but still has its own character and presence. And I do think those details around the door especially are going to be very important.
Okay.
And I look forward to seeing those.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mary?
I think it's looking very site appropriate, and I understand getting the final details in. And I would ask that you look to staff on the windows. Windows make such a difference, to make sure you're on the same page with staff on the windows that you select. But as far as fitting in with the site, yes, thank you. And changing the things you changed.
Sure.
Madeline?
I think we're so close, and I appreciate too that you're listening to the feedback. There's a couple of, and this may just be time limitations, but like you were mentioning, but there's a few things that scale-wise, I'm just not reading, maybe I'm not reading correctly, but I thought we had mentioned something about the scale of the windows, the size of those, and the headers being, kind of meeting at the same point as the door, with the exception of the garage doors, knowing that those have to be larger. And then the other scale thing is the vent on the front. Is it going to be that large, or is it?
It's functional for an apparatus bay, so you have to bring fresh air in and exhaust air out. So it's not just for decoration, it is functional.
It's functional?
Yeah, so it has to be sized to a certain size.
Okay.
Yeah, the aesthetics of it, I think, are nice. We could make it a false one and maybe exhaust on the side of the building if that made a difference. But I like the fact that it's a functional louver, but yes, if it's going to be the functional louver, it's got to be sized for the proper exhaust.
Okay. And then the last thing that I was noticing is where the door is on the front, is that like a covered area once you walk in, not that first shed roof, but once you walk underneath?
It's a vestibule.
Okay.
So it's something that a house wouldn't typically have, and I know we're just kind of making a commercial building look a little more residential, right? So it's a vestibule, so
Right.
from an energy perspective, it's required by code.
I'm just trying to decide, I know y'all are trying to marry that commercial with the residential, and having that double shed roof, it looks like a little bit much maybe, and I'm wondering if that is a vestibule, do you need it? I know we had mentioned maybe that may make it look a little bit too contemporary if you don't have the shed roof, but I think that double shed roof looks a little odd, and maybe those shed roofs can go over the garage doors, so that you just have the one over the door with the vestibule, and then you have a shed roof over each garage door to kind of bring in that residential look that you're going for. But that repetitiveness of the shed roof looks a little much.
Yeah, and we kept that kind of to the point that Ms. Thompson made about, the front of it. We went through a couple iterations where we pushed that all the way back in, put the vestibule inside the building. It ate up some square footage that was usable, but we
Right.
could do it. But then it just really became super flat.
Yeah, and I
super
don't think
flat.
you have to do that. I think it's fine to have it pushed out with the vestibule. It's just you got the one, and then you got that second one.
Right.
Maybe that second one doesn't need to be there. Maybe it can move.
Oh,
I don't know.
well, I just wonder if when we get more detail on that specific area, if he won't be able to
Right.
work out, all of y'all will work out those issues. And it doesn't bother me, but it will give us more detail right here, I think especially, is important.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah,
That would
we've
be good to
looked
see.
We've looked at just trying to let the primary roof extend down and kind of be the cover of the entrance. The slope is such where we would have to flatten the slope out, and then it becomes kind of squat on the roof, because if you extend that down, it hits over like right on top of the door.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to do that. I don't think
Right.
you have to do that.
I like the way the roof, the portion over the door breaks up that, and really relates it better to the entrance,
Right.
in my mind.
Yeah.
So,
And it
but I
gives
do
it some
think with the
dimension.
detail, it'll help us see it better.
And to the comments, I think lowering that roof height on the living quarters helped with that.
Yes,
Yes.
very
With what
much
we're
so.
discussing. And I would like to Madeline's point on the vent, it may seem a little large, but they were large.
Yeah.
Because they actually vented. And it's good to hear, this will actually serve a real purpose. It's not just decorative.
That's right. Yes.
I think these are all good comments. I think the things about the rendering that kind of bug us all, we've already been talked about, like siding reveals and corner boards and little, getting casings even on the apparatus bay doors, It's just a matter of, how would you even cap off siding, things like that, which I think you all will get to, but I'd love to see them reflected in the application we vote on, just so that we feel comfortable knowing
Sure.
what we've approved. One of the things I had thought about, are you all going to have any flagpole bases, any of that stuff? Anybody talked
will
about
be.
any of that?
There will be. I
Okay.
think they're shown on the site plan.
Okay. And it's, I don't know that we review it unless it's got like some, big stone base or something that matches the sign, or if they're just sitting out front. But if there's details to provide for that, bring those too. Siding, flagpoles, casing, corner boards. That entry porch, I kind of feel like I think everybody else does, where it's like, well, it's definitely in a different form, and we want you to do something interesting, right? But we also don't want it to be contrived feeling. And I think the last variety of this, there was a little bit more space between the canopy and the shed, and when everything lowered, those things came together a little bit. So I get some of that, and I think at some point we talked about that extending that one shed roof out to just do all of it, and let the brackets come up and catch it. There's so many varieties there, and I think we talked about even making that a smaller gable that was like baby brother to the apparatus bay. I think all those are valid ideas. I don't know if you've looked at all those, but I also don't want to run the risk of it just going, well, it looks like some Cape Cod with a giant, RV garage on the side. And it's like, well, that's not great for any of us. So, continue to look at that. I keep thinking that, that entry, if that's the pedestrian entry, lighting could be a big deal. We do review the lighting. You've got this vestibule cover thing. There's probably some lighting in the ceiling, but it might be worth expressing something like those small sconces on each side, just to, because right now it's like looks like like maybe a side exit door, and it is covered. And I think make as much of it as you can, I think, is a good thing, because it just starts to feel more like, let's focus on a nice front entry and pull attention away from the part of the building that's twice as tall as the rest of it, which is, we totally get. It's a necessity thing, but celebrate that entry as much as possible, and think about all those details. So, anything else, anybody? No? All right.
Very good.
Any other questions from you all specifically?
I don't think so. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, item number 4, discussion of an addition on a principal structure at 109 7th Avenue North. Jacob Lane is the applicant.
Jacob's out sick, so y'all are stuck with me.
All right. Welcome. If you want to give us the intro here, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely. So 109 7th Avenue North, we are looking at adding an enclosed stair to the side of the home to provide access down to their basement. So currently there is access, but you have to go all the way outside, and it's not particularly safe when that's the only way to get down for storm shelter and other things. So we looked at a few different options, and we felt like on the side was the least invasive, and we've got a couple of exhibits that kind of depict that, why we looked at that. But we did look at it on the opposite side and on the rear. But it'll be a little more clear when we look at the 3D images why we did not feel like those were successful locations. So 2 options for the side. One would come out a little bit further and would require a variance, and then one is a little narrower, but it comes forward further on the site. So would just love to get y'all's kind of feedback on those options.
Okay, let's hear from staff, please.
Thank you, and thank you to the applicants for coming to DRC to discuss the 2 options for an addition proposed at 109 7th Avenue North. This is a circa 1892 gabled L house, and features a historic addition on the rear of the building. So both options for discussion propose an addition on the side of the building on the right elevation and will be highly visible from the public right-of-way. Option A proposes a 6'9" wide, 15 long addition, and encroaches into the side yard setback. This option does not meet the side setbacks and would require a variance. Option B proposes a 4'11" wide and 18'7" long addition on the right elevation, and does meet the side setbacks. The forms, size, and materials appear to align with the guidelines. However, both options proposed are on the side of the building and do not align with the guidelines, as they recommend locating additions in subordinate locations at the rear of the buildings or in obscured facades not readily visible from street view.
If a rear addition is not feasible, an addition on the side facade may be appropriate when it is properly designed to complement the original building without overpowering it. An addition on the side facade should be set back from the historic forms and avoid alteration to or distraction from the character-defining features. The applicant notes that a side addition on the left elevation is not feasible off of the driveway and that the roof configurations on the rear of the building are not ideal for a new addition and require more invasive and complex addition. However, this does not make the placement of an addition on the rear of the building not feasible. There are a number of project considerations from BNS that will be shared with the applicant and may impact the design as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, any thoughts, anybody? Brian?
Yeah, I'll lead us off with this. I understand the request, but I also understand what aligns and doesn't align with the guidelines. And being that this is in such a prominent location in the right-of-way and prominent from the street, the side addition, and you see this form, I call them a transitional Victorian. You're not quite sure sometimes, where they're transitioning. And you usually do not see side additions like this on the houses in Franklin. And I just think it makes such an anomaly for that street with all the houses. Those houses on was that 7th Avenue? They're already pretty close to each other. It seems to encroach further out. And I would like to see you kind of maybe work to find another location for the staircase into the cellar or the basement.
Anybody else? No? Yeah, I'm sympathetic to the idea of trying to access the basement from not going outside, but I'm wondering if the rear, sort of where the stair is now, is a better option, and you might that first option where it's kind of against the driveway and encroaches a bit, you might revisit that and look at the survey and what space you've got to adjust driveways and such over just a little bit and see what can be done. But
That was based on the survey. I think we're pretty tight there.
'cause I'm looking at property lines and fences and things, and
Yeah.
there's probably 2.5 feet on the other side of the fence that's on your property too. So, you might look at that. I kind of agree with Brian. That's very difficult to think that this would be on the side of the house that's this visible in either variety, the skinny or the wider version. I'd like to see you look at some other places. Anybody else? Mary, did you have something you wanted to say?
Is there a way to consider putting it on the rear?
I think there is. We just were looking, those are all historic additions back there, so it would be invasive to the roof. We'd have to really adjust the roof lines back there. But if that's something, if that's really where it's preferred, then we could certainly look at that. I think also just from a flow perspective, the way the house works and lives, it made more sense to the homeowners to have it on this side. But we can certainly look at the rear if that's the preference. It just, y'all can see what those roof lines are doing. There's a lot going on back there that we would have to fuss with. But yeah, if that's the preference, I certainly think it's possible.
One more idea, and I've seen it in a lot of the historic homes in Franklin. If you're looking for access to like a tornado shelter into the basement, is an interior access. And many would have a hinged door in the floor or in a closet, somewhere like that, that had access to the basement or cellar, and you raise it, and then there are stairs that go down. So, if that's the goal, that could also might be a solution, just something to
I
consider.
had not thought about a floor. We have seen those too.
Yeah, I'm looking at your HVAC unit here on this version, and those are easier to move than all the construction we've talked about so far.
True.
So I don't know if you could come out that office. Again, that's a a kind of an odd flow thing, and you start to block windows, and you get into issues. But you've got some options here on where this could go that aren't visible from the street, and our guidelines are pretty clear on that requirement. So
I've lived in this house, and it's tight. I can see, and then it's got an extraordinary basement. It's just for the house. So I see why you would want it. I just feel like the addition on the side is proposed takes away from just the loveliness of that little cottage and the kitchen house, I suppose, that butts up to it. So I wish there were a way on the back to try to figure it out.
I'm wondering if you could take that taller kitchen roof and just extend that over just a little, enough to get a little shed that comes out and covers that, what is the entry deck, and shed it down to the stair, and that stair could be your entry stair, vestibule, and basement stair all in one. But yeah, right, kind of in this picture here. But yeah, you've got this low piece of roof, which is not helpful. But it looks like it's sharing a pitch on the backside, so you might be able to extend that over and tweak it a little. But that location could provide a couple solutions to all the issues happening with roof, and obviously you got access to the back of the house. Like, this is probably how the owners come in and out of the house, so might provide a spot to stand out of the rain and get inside too. Anyways, all right, any other comments or specific questions that you have?
Nope, that's helpful.
You think?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, item number 5, discussion of alterations, principal and site alterations at 121 Miles Manor Court. The Cashes.
Hello. Can we
You
bring in another chair? Is that possible?
Yeah, yeah. We thought you'd never come back.
Oh, yeah, you missed us, I'm sure. Monday night, might as well start bringing y'all pizza or something.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Okay, if you want to go ahead and tell us the latest, greatest on your project, and then we'll let staff give our feedback here.
Yes, sir. So we, just being honest, with the roof being in flux for a long while, kind of had to hit pause on anything related to the exterior of our home because we weren't sure if or how we were going to finish it. So we kind of had some things in the wings that we wanted to run by you guys, that we have since had the kind of the margin to take a look at. So we've come about the exterior doors before, just trying to land that plane on 2 exterior doors. Would love your thoughts on those. We are looking at, sorry, my screen's so small. Would love to talk about a fence in the front yard. I'd love to talk about our lanterns, just to seek approval on those. And then chimney caps. And then I think one of the more complex things is we have 5 daughters, as I think you guys probably know at this point, and lots of parking. And so lots of cars. So we're trying to just think about how we can be gracious to our neighbors and also fit the vehicles on our property that we need to, as they're quickly coming of driving age. So that's kind of the flyover of the things. Oh, and gutters as well, sorry.
Okay. Let's hear from staff here and get their feedback.
All right, we'd like to thank the applicants for returning to DRC to discuss some building and site alterations at 121 Miles Manor Court. There are 6 items noted within the application for discussion. I'll go through all of them. For the front and side door, new doors are proposed in the existing entrances. The existing doors aren't historic and are appropriate to replace. The proposed front door features Tudor design influences and is appropriate for the style of the building. The proposed side door is simple in design and features a Dutch door configuration and 9-light pattern. Feedback about the door designs and color options for the side door would be appreciated, as one is shown in a more natural wood finish and one is proposed in green. For the second item, for the picket fencing in the front yard, new front yard fencing is proposed. The proposed placement is unclear as it is shown in this image only fronting Miles Manor Court. Additional information is needed to understand the placement and height on the total front yard, but the proposed design is appropriate. For the next item, the gutters. The applicant would like to discuss options for gutters and downspouts. The building is dated to 1930 and previously featured OG-style gutters and downspouts. While the age of the building is on the cutoff date for the recommended round gutters and downspouts, this would be appropriate for the architectural style of the building. Additional information about the placement of downspouts and the finish of the material is needed for additional feedback. For the lighting that's proposed on the front and rear of the building, on the front of the building, there was a fixture here previously, and the proposed fixture appears simple and appropriate to the character of the building. Measurements have not been included, so feedback about the shown scale would be appreciated. The next item is parking pad and other site alterations. So the applicant has noted they would like to discuss location parking on the site. The proposed parking pad location does not meet the zoning requirements as it is located in the front yard and must be located either adjacent to the building, to the side, or rear of the building. The proposed parallel parking spots in the right-of-way would need to be coordinated with the streets department as they are located in the right-of-way. A number of other site alteration and elements are shown on the site plan with the parking that have not been previously approved, and additional information is needed as it appears other walkways, fences, walls, structures, and sports courts are shown for which additional information is needed to provide feedback if they wish to proceed with these items. The last item, chimney caps. The applicant is seeking feedback on options for chimney caps. However, options were not included for review for this discussion. Existing, there are metal rectangular chimney caps, and previously clay chimney caps were approved in previous COAs. Additional information is needed to review a proposed specification to provide feedback. Thank you.
Okay.
And I can kind of unpack each one of these as we go.
Yeah, let's see. Let's start with the doors. So these are both the existing openings. No change to those, just some new door slabs.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. And I wrote this in the submission, but there's a lot of AI going on, so I want to make sure that I think AI is amazing, but if there's not disclosure and there isn't disclaimer, then it can be a really dangerous tool. So, like for instance, that door right there, it put 4 lights in. The door we are proposing is 2 lights. So there's just one SDL, just a vertical right there. Yep. And I believe we discussed that last time we were here.
Yeah, and then previous meeting, I believe we discussed that either it should match the windows and have 6 panes, or go small with it. So we found a door that was historic to Tudor homes that had the 2 there. So we wanted to see what you guys thought about that.
Okay.
And we're open,
Yeah, let's hear some feedback on the doors. Let's do any comments on the front door?
I think that's a great choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Handsome.
Yeah.
I do too. I agree too. And then.
You guys like the 2 light?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Got it.
And then there was a question about stain versus paint, right?
I think that's the side door.
Yeah,
Okay.
this door we would prefer to stain for sure.
Okay.
And that one's currently stained. And then the side door, I don't know if you guys remember last time we were here talking about doors, this is really a copy, and this is AI, but this is effectively a copy of the 2 Dutch doors we put on the rear of the home in the addition. And so these would be Dallas Millworks doors. That's more in line with what it actually looks like. And the hardware obviously is just AI doing its best. So that's more the scale. I don't love that the scale of the stained one.
It's a little shorter, light up top.
Yeah.
So what's there today? Is that full glass?
It's I'm sorry, I don't have a picture of it. It's a 2007, very 2007 door.
The Simpson fir door that
Okay.
everyone orders for spec homes, and it's just a stain, I think 9 light.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it looks almost like mildly Victorian.
Oh, there
Okay.
you go.
There,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that's different than I thought.
6.
Yeah, okay. Understood. All right, any feedback on the side door, stained versus painted, the arrangement of lights, the Dutch, all that? Any thoughts? Holly? you got some?
I like the stain for both. I think it's, the consistency is nice and I think they look great.
Brian, do you have something?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the front door, just throwing out something. I mean, the two's fine there. But if you look at the windows that you have, 6/6, what AI put in for you was 2/2. And then what you're showing for the preference is 1 beside 1. So it's not over anything. So I kind of, the 2/2 kind of to me reflects more the 6/6 than the side by 2. But that's just a comment.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm afraid, Brian, I'm afraid that the 4/4 gets a, like, landscape proportion when the rest of the house is all portrait. That's what I was looking at, like,
So you're thinking it becomes too square.
I think it becomes not just square, it becomes like portrait, like
Oh,
this
you do?
screen.
Like
It's
a
sort of-
landscape.
Yeah, and I think it, to me, the proportion of the light is more important than the quantity, because sometimes the width of your opening or whatever dictates, well, I need 3 lights wide or 4 lights wide or 2, and that kind of portrait proportion there matches everything else on the house, and that to me is what's most important.
Of course, it's a custom door. It could
Yeah,
be.
could be whatever.
You can change the shape of the light.
Yeah,
But that was
that's
just a
right.
comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you guys like that proportion right there as you're seeing it? You know,
I do. I mean,
the
I
non-AI?
yeah, the not AI.
Okay,
Who knows what they're using? They might be using AI.
Yeah, God.
everybody.
Yeah, it was more the over
Yeah.
lights
No,
over
that's
lights
really
and side by
interesting.
lights.
Yeah.
That's all I was
Yeah.
making.
And
It's really interesting.
what I think would go more with the historic fabric of the house if on the one that has the half panes.
The
that
Dutch door?
What you're saying, they be the same shape as the ones on the house, because that other door is becoming extraordinarily popular in new subdivisions, and to me has a date of, hey, we did this in 2026 look.
Which door are you talking about?
Okay, the second door.
The side door.
The
This one?
side. Yes, I prefer that over the other shape of panes.
The one below, which is the green
green
one.
one.
Yes.
This one.
Yes, the green one is looking like,
I agree.
hey, we built a new house. I mean, I like
And part of
them.
it's
They're-
stained, yeah. I mean,
Which one's on the drawing?
The stain one is the one that, to
But I
me,
also-
has the form that goes with the
Yeah.
house, the light
Yeah, I
form.
think, I agree too. I don't think it's just the stain. I think it's the scale of the lights.
I agree.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, and
that's-
some of that, yeah, I don't want us to get really that dividing bar on a Dutch door is a function of where the hardware is. And you end up with, and the reality is that we're probably going to end up with the one at the bottom is closer to it.
Right.
AI has raised the hardware up to where you'd have
Okay.
to open it at your chest. So it's, yeah.
It's not thinking.
So.
Doesn't know everything.
No.
But I think it's, your point's well taken, that if you can find, and if they're going to custom make the door, you do have way more control over style and rail widths and all the little things. So, be picky, and if you can get a shop drawing like you did on the other one for that door, that tells us a lot, because we can read those pretty well, and it'll be more specific, and we won't have to guess on,
Is it
Which-
not there?
But that is the side door right there, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the drawing.
Oh, you have a drawing
Yeah.
for it. Yeah.
Hey, that one
It
is
is,
more
it
like
is a
the
little
same.
more rectangular
We don't
or
have,
more square than long rectangle. So I didn't see that. I'm sorry.
we don't have the, do we have the 2 light though?
Yeah. 2
Oh,
lights
yeah, there-
above. Okay.
There it is. Yeah, we got both.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
that's,
I'm sorry. I thought whatever they clicked on, you guys were seeing reflected on your screens.
No.
You have,
we're not
okay.
that high tech. Maybe in the new building.
Okay.
Ah, okay.
That'll be nice.
But this is replicating what's on the back of the house.
Yeah.
This door is what's, there's two currently installed now on the back of the house.
Okay.
Yeah, I think these are good.
Yeah, this is more close to the stained door proportions. The lights aren't so long and exaggerated. So, okay. All right, so we've talked about doors. Fencing in the front yard, I think staff mentioned that that design was appropriate. And if somebody wants to jump in and talk about that in any more extent, design-wise, but I think the question is, there's a site plan, kind of shows where one end stops on the Dayrick plan here, but kind of, I'm not sure where the other end goes as
Yeah,
it turns the
it's-
corner.
And it's a little bit nebulous, and I apologize for that. We were scrambling to get the submission in. So our hope would be really that the front yard would be what this picket fence is. It's very similar to our neighbors. So it would hit, can we possibly see that picture, Elizabeth, where that you just had up with the fence for one moment? Well, okay, that's great too. Are you able to zoom in? I'll explain what all you're looking at here in a moment, but if you're able to zoom in, so our hope would be, no worries.
It's a big drawing. I think generically speaking, it meets the guidelines. We'd just like to know, like, take this plan and just outline in a big fat red, this is the extent of the fence, and here's where gates are, and I think that just tells us where it starts and stops.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you effectively, it's that corner of that, around the porch on the side, right, to your right a bit. Oh, you guys aren't seeing that, sorry.
Yeah, we can see her, we
Yeah,
can see her
we're-
mouse.
Oh, you can see her.
Yeah, we got the
Okay.
TV here.
Yeah, so we're somewhere where that corner is, that's to your bottom, to your right and down a little bit. That, right there,
So,
yep.
so it's gonna run into the porch there.
Yeah, right into the
One of the
porch.
corners of the porch.
Exactly.
Is the porch gonna be in or out of the
Well,
fence?
preferably the porch would be outside of the fence so that people would not have to go through the fence to get to the porch,
Okay,
if that makes sense.
understood.
And this is really for our dogs. And
Okay.
then run up and then along Mayberry, which is that road right there.
Yeah.
And then down Miles Manor, and then to the driveway, and then up to the house, up to the corner of the house,
Okay.
to the right. Well, would not cross the driveway.
So it's gonna, where that sort of wall's shown and the piers, it would run
Yeah,
in
so this, a lot
the
of what
north
you're
side.
A lot of what you're looking at here is a master landscape plan that we are in the middle of, and I can explain some of that. We hit pause on it a year ago, just because we knew we weren't gonna even be able to look at any of this for the time being, budget-wise, so, it was, yeah, so
So it won't go over the driveway.
it would
That-
not go over the driveway, and that gate
Okay.
would not be there.
Yeah.
That would be a separate whole thing to discuss.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to have that
Just marked up,
just
real
marked
simple.
real quick.
Great.
Nothing too.
But unless somebody says, I don't think we've heard that design-wise, like the look of it is an issue. I think everybody,
I think it's just, when you come back, a good understanding of where it
where it is.
goes.
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
And there's some guidelines about height and things that staff can help you with.
What I was looking at, 36 is kind of a,
Yeah, the
Normal,
tallest,
that's-
for front yard, and then once you get to backyard, which is 20 feet from the front facade, then it can jump up a little higher. But
And are you all considering a new sidewalk?
yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
We are. We're trying to figure out if we can afford a new sidewalk in the context of all of it, but we are very much, because the sidewalk we have right now is just stamped concrete, and we would love to not have that.
Okay.
And that needs to have a certificate of appropriateness when you get to that.
I know I know, and I read this the other day, but as far as, I'm curious for you guys, knowing our home, when we are able to do sidewalks, what are a couple materials that are preferable?
I think we see some stone, like flagstone stuff, and then the most typical for historic homes is just concrete around here.
And brick, right?
A nice
Brick is also
concrete. We've
considered?
approved some brick, yeah.
Brick paver?
Like brick. Not like permeable paver brick, but like house brick.
That's it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's like, submit that,
That's
and we'd
perfect.
go, all right, I kind of
Okay.
understand. But, you know, there's concrete can be done very nice, and there's nicer mixes of concrete that you can get. People call that Vanderbilt mix concrete stuff. Yeah. And you don't have to top cast certain mixes. You can get a mix that's just got more brown sand and not crushed limestone like you'd get at Vulcan or something. It doesn't have any of that in it, so it just looks like an old sidewalk the day it's put down. And you can top cast any concrete and expose some of it, but you don't have to.
And
So
I-
concrete's fine, stone's fine, brick.
I thought that stone, I may be wrong, but I thought in the past, stone was not part of the guidelines.
So the guidelines for sidewalks and walkways, it's stone, concrete, or brick.
Okay.
I
And
think
it's-
we've seen some like cobbles that people have tried
Yeah.
to use, and we were like, there's not a lot of cobble in Franklin.
Or they're like
We've
the
approved
big
some.
Flat.
Yeah, big flat stone.
Flat stone or something.
We've approved some of that.
And I think with our guidelines permitting the three and the context of this neighborhood, there's some more flexibility than there might be in a downtown grid district.
Yeah.
Okay.
And while we're looking at it, so one thing that's complicated about our home is because it's on the corner and because of the way it's a long home rather than a wide home that's also on a corner, trying to steer people to the front door has always been a really challenging thing. And so we have tried to, from a design perspective, especially how we laid out the home interior, we're trying to make that front door more of a actual front door, because really people, the last 15 years we've lived there, have come in the side doors. So in that sense, just as we are thinking about walkways, I'm curious if you have any feedback for, again, not necessarily design, but just location of walkways as you see them.
Well, I mean, I would say, traditionally, and even other jurisdictions always just say there ought to be a fairly straight shot on traditional homes from the road frontage to the front door, which you have, and then all the other stuff is personal preference and appurtenance. But what I'd say is think through that hierarchy in terms of, if you have all these nodes and they're all detailed the same, none of them, if you have all the same kind of prominence, then maybe none of them say this is the most important. And it ought to. If you really think the front door ought to be most prominent, then maybe that sidewalk, that node that's in line on axis is the one that's detailed out in a higher way. And the other ones maybe take a back seat in terms of design and maybe the nodes aren't as necessary at that like northwest corner on the screen here. You've got one of those square nodes. Like, well, maybe that's just a simple turn because it doesn't need to be a spot that's celebrated.
Right.
Maybe it does. Maybe there's so much parking over there and people coming that nobody's coming from the front.
It's
So
tricky
think through all
because
that.
Miles Manor is so narrow right there. No one's ever going to park on that street. They always are pulling
Yeah.
to Mayberry.
Yeah.
Know? And
It's
so-
tough. It's tough.
Yeah, and so if it's okay, then since we're on this, to look at the parking right there, that parking pad. Again, we're trying to figure out where do we fit 7 cars.
Yeah.
Long term, and just so you, like when you see that pickleball court there, that's literally just, if we did something like that, and I don't even know if it's appropriate, we would obviously find out first, but it would just be scored. It's just lines in the concrete. We're not trying to like do a pickleball court.
Yeah. That's your motor court.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah,
that,
the northernmost, I keep saying northernmost, but I think it's the south side, Page North, those aren't even something that we would consider because they're not even on the property. So it's something, I mean, is that true? It's like, it's in the public right away,
our
right?
landscape designer, I think had spoken to you guys at some point. I might be totally misunderstanding because I wasn't a part of the conversation, but she said something like that was potentially okay.
They might let you do it, but it's yeah, I mean, if we're told as the board, like, yeah, we have some purview over this, then we default to our guidelines, which is you're not supposed to have parking in the front. So maybe the ones in the back might be okay, or shifting the 2 in the front.
Are you calling front north?
I'm calling Miles Manor, your address,
Okay, got it.
road.
Got it.
But the ones that are, keep saying westernmost, easternmost, since we're upside down, if those shifted back and they were on the side or back, that would meet the guidelines. But I just don't know. It's kind of a hairy area when it's in the public right of way, so they're not even, you wouldn't even own the parking spots, but I don't even know if the city would let you gravel them or just pull into the grass, or I have no idea. And I'm not sure that we're the people to tell you one way or the other. We just know that if they came back and said, we've told them they could pave this and have it, then we'd say, okay, our guidelines say it can't be in the front yard. And then we'd review it under kind of that
Okay.
auspice. And then the other ones at the Plan South, which is really north, those are in the front yard as well. So those don't strictly meet the guidelines. Does anybody have any feedback on those, since we know that's in our purview?
Well, yeah, we've had people come before us and request for front yard parking before, and I know they've been discouraged or denied, and it doesn't align with our guidelines. But you see, you have 7 cars to park. They would need to be either, I guess, beside the house or behind the house to have that kind of parking.
So, just out of curiosity, because that's a separate lot that we own, does that play into this at all?
I don't know.
That would be something probably for our zoning administrator to weigh in on any permits and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, and it might, we don't know the answer to that, or I don't.
I mean, I would still consider it front of house.
Yeah, even if there's not a house there, it's still in the front yard of yourself and theoretically the neighbors, like if everybody started parking in the front.
And if you imagine that a house was built on that lot, it would be in the front of that house.
That's right.
Got it. Okay.
So you might look at that and reconsider where and how that happens. You've got some space on that top side of the plan there, which, of course, you'd love to have great lawn and landscaping. Who wouldn't? But if you have that many vehicles, you do have some side yard before your property line there. And did you all ever build the buildings in the back?
No.
Not
So
yet? Okay.
That's, another question we have. So that's essentially what we would love to potentially do is we cannot afford to build that entire carriage house right now. What we would love to figure out, is there a way to build, because the retaining walls for the pergola, these are all items that were approved at the COA. We have that pergola and then the carriage house. And the retaining wall system really all ties together, at least to my extraordinarily green understanding. And so one thing we would love to consider and see your feedback on is, could we put the footings in for that carriage house and then effectively make it some sort of an English garden currently, that then later on we'd be able to build the carriage house once we're able. And obviously I know you want to see a lot more what that would actually look like, but it's just something we're kicking around as we kind of save the money to be able to build that building, because we'd love to build it.
Yeah, I think we'd look at it. It sounds like to us it would look like almost like site walls or fencing of some sort, depending on how high it is. And if you put a garden in it, we don't review the garden necessarily, but the fence / foundation walls, we would review that. So, but all that to say, if you decide that, and I think we're telling you that trying to get the parking to the side or back is what our guidelines say. If the parking moves that direction, you might consider how it affects that building, what future plans you have for that. Because you got to weigh your priorities for, could that English garden and that building be shifted in a couple feet to park behind it, between Mayberry and it? You're just a couple feet from making that work. So look at all that. But Brian's right. I don't think in my time on the board, 4+ years, that we've ever approved front parking. I don't remember one. So,
Great.
Okay.
yeah. All right, I've got fencing in front yard, gutters. You have OGs now. You're wanting to go to half round?
Well, we're
Is that-
just curious to have a conversation. So at least when I read the guidelines, for historic buildings, it says It's interesting because there's a decade that's really not described in the guidelines. It says for buildings built prior to 1930, it's half round, and buildings built prior to the 1930s, half round. After the 1930s, OG. But then when it talks about for new buildings or additions, it says 1940. It doesn't say, it's not the missing decade. It says buildings, or if it's mimicking something prior to 1940, use half round. If it's mimicking something, mimic's a bad word, but
Sure.
after 1940, use
Yeah.
OG. So
And I think staff is saying that they felt like the half round would be appropriate for the age of this house. Is that what we heard?
Yeah, the house is dated to 1930, so it's kind of on that cutoff line, but the half round is commonly seen on Tudors too, so.
I guess a question for you guys would be, given the very interesting fact that we're right in the middle.
Their computer's yelling at her.
I know, make it stop.
Go ahead.
Given that we're right in the middle, is there potential that based on budget and all that we could have the leeway potentially to, I mean, obviously, we're going to come to the.
I think we're hearing that both might be appropriate, OG or K-style. Is that?
So what was previously existing was the OG style gutters. So I believe those were removed at some point during this, but wasn't detailed to replace them in any way on any previous building permits or COAs. So if they put those back, it would put it back to the condition that it was previously in and approved to be.
I'm still confused. What's there today?
There are no gutters.
No
Or
gutters.
downspouts
And it
on the
had
building.
OGs before,
Mhm.
and you're saying that they could put back what was there, or half rounds would be fine.
I believe so, because in the building permits, it wasn't detailed out to have those removed or anything like
Okay.
that. So those would have been existing, not touched.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so what I'm hearing, I think, is either one would be okay.
What do you like better?
I mean, the half rounds are always beautiful and a great, well, especially this style of house.
I
and
love
that
the way
tile.
they look.
Yeah,
I'm
so.
being told they're not great at water.
Oh, they're very good. I mean, and actually you have very simple eaves and overhangs. That would look the best on your style house would be the half rounds.
They get a little splashy in downpours, but so do all gutters.
Yeah, that was my only concern, considering it's all wood, all wood windows and all wood siding now. So I was just a little bit nervous about that, but.
Are you pro leaf guards or not?
Does Crown even do traditional gutters? I'm not sure.
They do.
They do?
Yeah.
Just
Well-
to help with maintenance on the,
They do make a cover for half rounds.
Right.
It goes on the inside,
right,
to catch the
Yeah.
cantrells and
Right.
the little helicopters that fall from the maple trees. So, I mean, you can get something like that.
And none of them are without maintenance, but some are better than others. So you just, pick your poison. Get a nice ladder.
Yeah.
Okay, gutters, I think we talked about. Lanterns, lighting. They just showed the lantern on the front.
Yeah, another AI disclosure. That one is larger than we would do. It's larger than the one that was there, as far as the proportion of it
Okay.
is concerned.
So there was a light in that location.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
That was one of the questions I had was, is it more appropriate on the side or the top? But considering we know there was one on top, that kind of answers that
the
question.
scale of that is too tall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have the specs on that, of what the height would be?
So I believe we met with Bevelo out of Louisiana, and it's a 14-inch light.
Okay.
Which I think is the smallest
Yeah.
of their options.
Yeah, that one's like a 20.
Yeah.
I was counting bricks. It looks like about 20.
Yeah.
Brick.
But that
Okay.
one's really tall.
Yeah. Okay.
Any comments on that, anybody?
Is it going to be gas?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I believe, according to our guidelines, that would not have had a gas light.
When did we get gas in that part, especially of town?
In the 1950s.
Okay.
I'm thinking of on Boyd Mill and some other places, but I think just weigh in on it is my.
Yeah, and we've had several people ask for gas, and we've told them to use electric just based on the age of the house and what was available then. Trying to keep it as. Do you have gas lanterns anywhere else on the
Our
house?
neighborhood has a lot. There are 5 homes in our neighborhood that have gas.
Yeah.
This is a home that's on Margin Street, South Margin. I'm thinking it's probably the same architect who did our home that has a gas lantern. And so as we looked at homes that we loved and that seemed similar to our style, a lot of them had gas
Okay.
that we came across.
Oh, sorry, can I comment?
Yeah, Holly, go ahead.
I think given that the light bulbs you'd be buying would be like brand new, not historic anyway, I think that the gas would look a lot more historic than just the bulb. But I think if you want I think either way would be fine. But if there's gas already in the neighborhood in these houses for the lanterns, it seems like it would be appropriate for the location, age of the house and all that to do gas, is my opinion. But
Yeah, the guidelines, yeah, and it's, we try to interpret things for Franklin, but I don't think the gas is a bad look. It's kind of like the roof thing. I'm like, who wouldn't want the roof? That thing's beautiful. And gas, I'm like, well, lots of these were converted to and from gas to electric over the years, just in Franklin, not a ton. But you see them in Metro, you see them other cities where there's a little bit of both. So I'm not too hung up on that, but our guidelines do say that it's, but things like light fixtures come and go from houses too, over time and change, and it's like signage to me. Come off at any time. Somebody could swap it out. Any other thoughts on the lanterns? That's probably no feedback at all, because you're
No,
like,
it's
so
great.
I mean, is it? You have something, Emily? Go ahead. Or
The
Yes, ma'am.
guidelines for historic buildings on lighting say to preserve and maintain original light fixtures on pre-1960 buildings. If new light fixtures are needed, use simple fixtures that are appropriate to the scale and period of the house and constructed of historically prevalent materials. New fixtures should be placed in traditional locations, so that gas would kind of fall into the category of historically prevalent materials for the age.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. The light that was there was put there in 2006. Well, it might have been replacing a light that was put there forever ago. No, the oldest one we have is from prior to our renovation, and that was done in
They wish they had pictures from a long time
Trust me.
ago.
Yes, we do.
I would
We
pay
do.
big money for old pictures.
And I think that it deserves more discussion, but just historically, when the house was built, it would have had electric lights, and they would have loved having electric lights. I mean, they had been around maybe 30 years in Franklin by that time, but everybody wanted electricity. And when you see the ads for houses for sale, and even in 1928, 29, and 30, it advertised has electric lights. I mean, that's a big thing. So that would have been coveted to have that. And Franklin did not get natural gas, and it was supplied by the city when it was until the late 50s, early 60s. And then the city sold their gas arm of the city services to a private company. So, I mean, that's just the history of it.
Yeah.
However smart the internet is, it says that they transitioned to electricity about 1910.
Yeah.
Well, if you could afford it and you had it run to your house,
What?
You
If
had-
you can afford it,
and had it
yes.
run to your house.
But you
Yes.
said electricity or gas?
Electricity.
Electricity, right.
Started
And-
about that time.
Yeah,
I
1910.
just would like it to be a discussion because it's been a discussion for other homeowners.
I was driving around downtown Franklin and taking pictures, just honestly to educate myself. Because it's an interesting, there's so much electric. I mean, it's predominantly electric, obviously, and gas is more expensive. But when you're driving around, a lot of the homes have gas and electric on the same home. So kind of like what we're doing here, there's multiple gas and electric in the back like 213 Ninth Avenue South. That's a house I did years ago, and the front light is gas, but everything else is electric. So it's just an interesting observation. Trying to make a rhyme or a reason to it, but it's,
Yeah.
I was reading the guidelines and they don't talk about fuel source at all. You know,
Yeah.
the only thing it says that's really interesting is to use warm white light effectively and to avoid colored gels, and which is amazing that we all are generally gravitate toward warm white light, which came from gas ultimately, came from fire. And so I'm just curious, is there a delineation in the guidelines as to what it needs to be, or is this kind of one of those?
I think we just read the part where it just says it should be a fixture that, is historically appropriate for, and I think that's my thing, is like the gas lantern. People took gas and made them electric and vice versa over the years. So I don't get too hung up on that, whether it's gas or not. I'm more concerned about the fixture itself. I don't feel like if you drive around and see a gas lantern, you go, well, that's just, why would they ever put that on that house? You do see fixtures and go, oh my God, look what they did. So I just don't know that the light source is,
Okay.
well, it's important, right? Because you can pick the wrong electric and go, oh my gosh, it's like blue neon.
We wouldn't be shooting
weird,
for
right?
6,000K, I promise.
Yeah, but my point is, I think the shape of the fixture, and then we have some other verbiage there to cover kind of the color of the light. But if the fixture's appropriately scaled and styled for the house, that's, I think, what the guidelines were really trying to hint at. But that doesn't take away from the fact that we have, like I said, we've had several people ask for gas, and we've told them no on that same premise, that a house of that vintage in this town would not have had gas originally. So I don't know what that means for this, but
Can I ask you one last question?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't get, at least in reading, it didn't find a really clear answer on residential buildings. Are light posts in a front yard something that is potentially allowed?
we've had that question come up recently.
There are a couple of houses in our neighborhood that do that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead,
you're good.
Elizabeth. Let's hear what the.
So, like a light lamp post in the front yard, that wouldn't be recommended. Yeah,
Did you say would not be?
would not be recommended.
Yeah. We've had some that had very prominent piers with a light on top, that I think the only time we've seen those and approved them was when they were on the side and they were like the edges to swinging gates. So like on your site plan here, you've kind of got some vehicular gates. They're pretty far in the front yard, so I don't know if those got shifted back a little and then had some lights on those. We have considered things like that and approved some, but they were past the front of the house. I don't know if you all can do that with this motor court you've got drawn here, but generally in the front yard, we don't see them on piers, posts, none of the
Yeah,
above.
the house directly across from us in our neighborhood, they have in the front yard, there's a light post.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Some of them are done
It's
before,
moved
right?
over time, since in the 15 years.
Those were done before historic zoning.
Okay.
Yeah.
If it's gas companies put it in free.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
All right, so we've talked about lantern, parking. We talked about the other chimney caps. So you had terracotta shown originally. Is there
Do you remember?
something you're wanting to do different than what was approved?
Well, I don't recall clay being approved, was it? Yeah, I think.
on the original
we
drawings?
had submitted clay, but then I feel like it was not approved. I might be
It was
wrong.
approved on the original drawings from
Huh?
your architect at the time.
From 2022?
22,
They
yeah.
were- Okay. Was the styling a problem then? I'm just trying to remember.
I think we went back and forth on this, the size of them, but then we ultimately approved
That's not to say you can't go, now that we're here, here's what we want to do.
Yeah, what do you guys like?
I mean, that's up to you. You have to tell us what you like.
Well, one of the things that came up when we installed the fireplaces was it with the flue, we can't put clay next to the metal, up top, basically. And so that became,
Are they metal flues?
yeah, they are.
Okay.
So we can't put clay next to metal. However, we did like the style of the chimney cap that was clay, and so can we keep the style and go copper, or just what's your preference there?
Like a
Is really our question.
Jack Arnold chimney pot?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the
Yeah,
most
I mean,
prominent brand.
it
Yeah.
is, yeah.
I mean, submit it. I mean, you have metal covers now, and the copper chimney pots are
But it's the
a
double
nicer version of that,
Right, yeah.
and they're well detailed. Most of them come from English Voicey and Lutyens houses, and they were modeled after the copper ones they had made in England. So I'd say submit it. I mean, is there anything in our guidelines that talks about the exact material of chimney
Yes.
pots?
So if chimney caps are desired, use clay, slate, stone, or low-profile metal caps painted to match the brick that do not overhang the rim of the chimney.
Okay. Yeah. We'll bring it and show everybody. I know what they look like, but they may not know what that looks like.
Will you say those materials one more time?
Clay, slate, stone, or low-profile metal caps.
And with the image that's shown, when they say the low profile, it's the chimney that's the larger chimney and not the smaller. The smaller is not a low profile. It gives you that gable look right over the chimney, and that's really not appropriate for the historic district. That
Small
style.
one?
The big one.
Okay, yeah, the big one is just what came with the metal.
Yeah, I'm
flue,
saying
Which we did not like.
the guidelines support the smaller one more than the large one.
Yeah, and the small one is what's original, well, at least from 2007, we haven't changed that. So we took the brick back to the original brick, but like, we got the paint off of it, but, that's the original chimney cap to us, so. All right.
Okay, chimney pots. Anything else you want us to talk about on your site plan specifically? We covered a good bit of it.
Well, I mean, if we can just maybe, again, some of that's sort of half cocked and half finished, but I am curious, would we, if we, have a concrete driveway, are we allowed to score lines in it for pickleball court?
I don't think. Could you even see the score lines?
No.
If it's scored, because down in a
It's pretty low.
yeah. I mean, people
I
do
just
all
don't wanna
kinds
do-
of score patterns because there has to be joints in it, regardless.
Okay.
I don't know that we review score lines.
It's almost enclosed and behind the gate, so.
Yeah. And when you're talking about score lines, it's literally like the tooled expansion joints, like they're going to put in anyways.
Half inch.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know anybody have any other. I mean, people put up basketball goals and go out there with duct tape for their kids and stuff. So this seems more permanent, but even less visible than that. So I don't know that that's a. What's that? Yeah, I mean, you could do the interior of the court in a paver and the rest in concrete, but I don't know what that. As soon as one brick settles and then the ball's not bouncing like it should, but there's
I've-
ways to
I
do
haven't
it.
had that happen.
When you're playing pickleball.
No,
Oh.
I'm saying, the one at the old jail, we did it with the change, and it hadn't,
Hadn't settled much. If it's done right.
it was just it was, I think, a different color of the same material.
What we did at our office, we have a parking pad that's got a picture frame around the edge and a diamond pattern. Inside the diamond pattern was Vanderbilt mix, and it was sandblasted, and the rest wasn't. So it's just got a little more texture in the middle, and the outside's a little more smooth. But little stuff like that is so subtle, but just gives you a little
Okay.
enough difference when you're looking for it. You can see it.
And then that motor court there is bigger than what's currently there, which would allow us a couple more cars. So we're just trying to, you know, figure out as we submit for that, what, I'm not familiar with what's appropriate there, what's allowed. Originally, you know, our house was on one lot, but then we bought the lot next door, and so they try to confine everything and even had an easement for the current driveway. I think it's about a 2-foot easement, because they were going to build a house next door to us on that south lot as far as the screen is concerned. And then, so we're, you know, we would love to add some parking down there, you know, especially if it becomes too complicated on the other parts of the property.
Are you speaking down at the bottom of the driveway?
Yeah, at the bottom of the driveway, which is right, to the right.
Yeah, not that, yeah.
Kind of-
Just at the bottom of the
Yeah,
driveway,
down.
like all the way down.
If
near
you go
the-
up a bit, like where the green
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, where the green is.
Yeah,
That's
Just
kind of where our
south of the
garage
green.
is, and that's the, you know, and it goes down, the grade changes right there.
Yeah.
So just curious about, and really, most of what would be added is to the east, toward the rear of the home.
Right. So this rear patio with the dining and fire and all that, it's kind of this sunken patio. Is that built? Parts
No,
of it?
It's in the COA, and we're
Okay.
in the process. I mean, honestly, we were just waiting.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to figure out what was approved and what's
Yeah.
new.
So
I
what-
remember looking at pool and the wall around pool.
Yeah.
We've had lots of discussions about that, what could be seen as you're driving up before you hit the curve. And we would consider a lot of those same things with parking, except, you know, the guidelines explicitly talk about parking on the side or rear. So behind that front facade of the house, even on this south lot, could be possible. I don't know how that's interpreted on a separate lot, but
That gets into codes too.
yeah.
Not
So,
just
to make
us.
sure I understand correctly, is moving that driveway toward the green potentially possible? Moving toward the
Yeah,
rear?
that's we would consider it after the other departments in the city tell us that, yes, that's acceptable, then we'd consider it for just historic, you know, site and setting alteration, basically, for us.
Okay.
But I'm not sure we know enough about whether you're allowed to, I mean, I assume if you wanted to expand your house over onto that, out the side, you know, if we approved that, it lets you do it. Because it's your property, I just don't know.
Well, you do a final plat then.
Yeah, combine them or whatever. Go ahead.
I was going to comment that they would have to consolidate the lots in order to go over.
Yeah, so it may, but that, I would assume there's some difference in putting a building and doing surface parking. Because if somebody else owned this lot and just said, I'm going to put some parking towards the back so I can show up and camp out or whatever they're going to do.
Pilgrimage.
Yeah, that nobody would, you know, can't tell them no, I don't think. So check on all the rules and work with the other departments. Staff can help you, point you to those right people. And then, like I said, we're just unsure of where our purview starts and stops on, this is just particular because
Okay.
the two lots and then there's right-of-way stuff. So, okay.
Great.
I think we've
Okay.
talked about all the topics I wrote down. Did I miss anything? Miss anything?
No, we're good.
Okay, thank y'all.
Thank you
Thank you.
guys so much.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, what about a break after a couple hours?
A little break.
Yeah, we've got two more, so let's take a little break. It's, is it 5:45? I was like 6:45, 5:45. All right, let's come back in 6 minutes. Is that a big enough break?
6 minutes, all right.
Math classes. I know.
We're going to take up our agenda here with item number 6, discussion of a conceptual master plan draft at Carter Hill Park at 1220 Columbia Avenue. Lisa Clayton is here from the Parks Department, and welcome, Lisa. If you'll give us an overview of this project, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to come before you this evening. As you know, the expansion of Carter Hill Park is exciting. Franklin's Charge still owns the property we're going to speak of today, and by the end of June, it'll be transferred to the city of Franklin. The goal today is to just receive some initial feedback as the commission will weigh in more on details as we take a look at the plan, as we start to implement the plan more so. This is, years ago, it was actually in 2013 when we did Carter Hill Park originally, we had an overall kind of high-level master plan in which we could then create a checklist as a department and also with our partner with the Battle of Franklin Trust, as they will be partnered with us again, is to begin to implement that plan. And so each year we're able to, from volunteers to implementing it within our budgets, we're able to actually make that park come into existence. So we had asked, Battle of Franklin Trust actually contracted with KVD, who originally did the master plan that is local here, and this is what's before you this evening. The goal is to take a look at I'm kind of taking this a little bit on a road show. I've gone before the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, the Civil War Battlefield Commission. I'll be going before Franklin's Charge as well as the residents next week around this surrounding area to meet with them on site to understand that sometimes as the park has grown, it also becomes a neighborhood park and not just a historical site for our visitors. And I think that's very important. What's before you this evening basically is a high-level rendering of what trails would become. We believe that it would match along the opposite side of the road with Columbia. You'll have the split rail fencing that we're known for when all of our battlefields. But there have been some requests that as you build a Civil War site, that is very unique. We have requested that more picnicking begin to take place. This is right beside residents now, whereas on the opposite side, you had to actually walk into the park. This is next to the library. It provides another opportunity for respite. The Reddick Senior residents are here, and so I've been in conversations with several of those, but I will go before the population next week, is what is it that they would like to see? They would like access through that tree line in some way so that ADA accessibility takes place and that this becomes a little bit of their backyard park. From the Battle of Franklin Trust standpoint, our goal is to work in tandem to make sure the future Carter House Visitor Center has a ADA accessible walkway through this park from the new visitor center, and that is one of the things that I bring before you this evening to speak of is Straw Street. Straw Street, this whole park is almost, it's just dissected by the roadways, and that's because progress took place and we recaptured the battlefield after the fact. However, we believe there might be an opportunity here. The city of Franklin owns Straw Street. It is a local roadway. We have run traffic counts along this area. It's very low as far as any crash is concerned, and actually it is several miles per hour below the speed limit that people, because it's so narrow through this area, they actually go almost 7 to 8 miles below the speed limit when they travel through here. However, it would be wonderful to repurpose that roadway. We would not abandon the roadway because we would own both sides of the roadway as a city. So therefore then we would repurpose from asphalt maybe to turf. But it was also important that I've heard from several residents when the DePriest property was being demolished. They actually came to the opening and I had an opportunity to speak to several of the residents who live here. A lot of them use Straw Street and have for many years to walk to Columbia into downtown versus, so if we're going to do away with Straw Street, can that also be part of the walking trail system? And absolutely, we believe that we can coordinate that effort with no problem. You would see interpretive signage, you would see water fountain and a dog potty. We'd have dog potties as well as the dog and the human water fountains on this site. A lot of people in this area who use the other side of the park or walk in this area have asked for that. We actually, when Franklin's Charge took those structures down, we have water taps on site, so it'd be nice to tap into that. No pun intended there. And we would do basically a landscaping plan as you see what's across the road. It should look the same. It should look as one and not disjointed. So we would keep, if you will may call your attention to the Granberry Street. There is a crosswalk to the sidewalk toward the Williamson County Library. Our suggestion is to keep that opening there for maintenance so that we may mow that property and not have to pull into any private area that's through here or even on Straw Street further. And that would be able to just pull in and be able to mow and landscape and maintain the tree structures and the natural landscape as much as possible. Other than that, I'm really here to listen to your thought process of seeing this for the first time. You all will see it many times, as anytime there's an improvement that's made to the property, we'd be bringing it before historic zoning. But I thought it would be, y'all have been so gracious, at least to me, to listen when I bring plans or make you go on site to property, that I received great input. The overall arching goal is to redesign, add to this design that you see today, and add a checklist behind that of the recommendations. And then ultimately, that would go to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for approval, and then also budgetary. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I will say that I did take this before some of the city leadership team, which is made up of many directors, engineering, building neighborhood services, planning, others, and they were very gracious. One recommendation they asked for me to mention as I move forward on this roadshow is on Straw Street, instead of exactly where you have the closure, is that potentially could the rest of Straw Street at the intersection of Reddick and Straw is to bollard that, allow that to be emergency access instead of, we believe that, or the conversation is, this could be a cut-through if you do not take care of that. It would not be to where we would repurpose that road to turf, but you would maybe put bollards in, but it could be emergency access if needed for fire or police. Something to consider as we talk about this, but I'll yield it back to you, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Staff, you have any comments on this one?
We don't. Lisa summed it up just great. And
Okay. Commissioners, anything that you have questions about or thoughts on?
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I understand completely. So I always thought that portion of Straw Street would be closed. Is it not closed now? Okay, so it's still open today.
Yes.
So we're just talking about what's being shown here as that portion's closed.
Well, no portion is closed at this time, so when it, but
Potential.
potentially, once we approve this, if everyone's in agreement, then we would begin to remove it.
But just up to this point.
Yes, if not, just up to that point, and then potentially what has been shared was at Reddick, at the intersection of Reddick and Straw, maybe that would become emergency bollard of some sort, so that you still could have access through that back if an emergency, but other than that, it would be closed to vehicular traffic, through traffic.
The part behind Reddick would be closed too. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
So where you see the, I guess it's an ingress and egress to the back part of that Reddick senior residence, that part would be closed too?
That would be closed for just emergency access. So
Just
the
emergency.
residents would be able to enter into Granbury that would hit the red light. One of the other things that the leadership team brought up is they asked me to consider before taking to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen is what would be the realignment of Granbury Street, Claiborne, and Columbia. And so I shared that with you this evening is if you've ever been through there, it takes you just a minute. And I'll just leave it at that. It'll just a minute.
If you've been through.
If you've, through that intersection, it would be better that it aligned. And so do you move Claiborne down and toward where the cannonball structure is? And it would align through that way? Or do you move Granbury up and align it to Claiborne? And there's a lot of,
Or is it a little of both?
or is it a little, yes, sir.
Yeah.
You're correct.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was like, do they ever want to align that thing? We fought so hard to get the parcel back and to slice a chunk off, but maybe it's more palatable if it's Granbury does half of it and Claiborne does half of it, and you sliver off smaller pieces of each one.
Well, another thought is it slows traffic down. You know, I know we talk about the easy flow of traffic, but if someone can't run easily between Granbury and Claiborne, and they have to stop at a stop sign, the light, and then turn, and then again, it does slow traffic down. So, that's another thought.
Yes, sir, it does. What it does, though, is a lot, is Columbia slows down versus more of Granbury and Claiborne, as you're trying to come through those areas and turn onto those sites. So as the city takes a look at Columbia Avenue and those improvements maybe through that area, it might be the time of making at least some type of improvement from a walkability standpoint, as well as one of the areas is it's very hard. This is a state route on Columbia Avenue. So just to put a crosswalk in anywhere is not allowed. We would have to then commission that to the state to say, we believe this gives enough sight lines to where we could do. We will always have this park divided, but can we improve it in some manner over the next few years?
Well, Claiborne is a very narrow street, so I would see some challenges.
Yeah.
It's just narrow. And
Yeah.
there's not much frontage you can take.
Yeah, I'd love to see what the experts kind of come up with on that, and just see what their recommendations might be and the rationale for it.
But we're
You know.
really, that's not what you're asking about
Yeah.
tonight anyway.
Well, what I'd like to do is maybe put at least some type of caveat in the master plan, is that this would be considered maybe through traffic engineers or take a look at that realignment in order to bring something back to you all to consider. Because I realize you normally don't get into the traffic patterns of things, but because of this site, I think it's real important that we do consider it as part of, just the same as you weigh in on a walking trail.
Well, I'll disclose, I own a house on Claiborne. So I would like, if you're considering this, to have a conversation with the neighbors and take a look at the width of the street and the width of the front yards and what's happening with parking. And I wish it were an opportunity. I just, thinking about it, as much as I've been on that street, I don't know.
It's challenging. It's very challenging.
But if your main question is about closing Straw Street, as you're shown here,
Yes, sir.
I'm all for it. That'd be great.
I agree. Yes.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
especially if the people that live on the street, are they okay with that idea?
I'm having a public meeting next Monday evening from 4:30 to 6 on site.
Gotcha.
And I've also been invited to come into the Reddick Senior Center to meet with them. So I'm not in any hurry to try to get this plan over the next month, but I would like to just make sure I receive all the input.
So what, process-wise, staff, both of you all could probably help us understand. When this comes back, will we be voting on like a recommendation first, and then it's gonna go somewhere and come back for COA? Or is there no COA for something that the city is just changing the
So,
paving to grass?
good question. I mean, Lisa's just here right now for kind of preliminary kind of feedback. Eventually, they're going to put all this feedback into a big master plan. As of right now, it's not in historic preservation overlay, but it will be later this year.
Okay.
So whenever this does, I mean, it is city property, it is a change. I'll have to double check on if y'all would weigh in, if you would give a preliminary recommendation. That may be the case, but I can certainly find out.
Okay. Yeah, I think you've heard good feedback on the Straw Street closure. The first thing that came to mind when I looked at it earlier was, well, people start cutting through, and you've kind of thought some of that through, and lots of ways you could dissuade people from doing that, especially bollards definitely dissuades them. But, you know, sometimes it's speed bumps and all kinds of stuff. But I think if you can overcome that and the neighbors, you know, creating some thoroughfare where that's a paved way for people to get through to Columbia from Straw Street, is there intention that the public library site becomes part of this battlefield interpretation, or has that not been discussed? I assume it's as much battlefield as any of the rest of it.
You're correct, Chairman. The goal is that we would create some type of walking trail that would continue to lead down Columbia through some of the county property. With that, you may not interpret all of their property, but you would at least begin to have the opportunity to have some interpretive signage of what may have taken place through that area. We do have a lot of documentation to understand at certain points on Columbia what was taking place, and so it would be great to have that visual. So it may be more of just an interpretive walking trail versus just a sidewalk.
That's what I was thinking. If the trails just stop at the sidewalk on the other side of Granbury, or will they go on and become something
I
that
think that's the
people
goal.
can walk some distance?
And Franklin's Charge has wanted there to be a conversation on that front swath of the library and the enrichment center, that there be some kind of permanent easement, so that that stays. And I will say, I will take myself out of the conversation after this meeting from the other, because.
The Claiborne side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll leave the room.
I just want to say that, that vista from the Carter House, you know, all the way down Columbia is just so important. And it's one of the things that was so exciting about preserving this piece of historic open space. And I think it's going to get, that to me, makes it a great idea to close off Straw, because you're just really emphasizing the length of that vista. And then when you talk about connecting Claiborne and Granbury, I mean, obviously, you're going to have to take off some part of that corner there above Granbury, which is, I don't know, that will be important to really study and make sure that you're maintaining as much of just the long view of that, you know, that whole property from the Carter House perspective.
Absolutely.
Anything else anybody want?
Just one more thing. I can see that there are pros and cons for the Reddick senior residences. But having access to this park seems like would be a really wonderful upside for the trade-off.
Oh, absolutely. We want it to be a neighborhood park as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. it's
And also
exciting.
tell the larger picture, so.
And you can see, I mean, this is a great example of how much the neighborhood uses the adjacent park that is historic open space. I come out here myself quite often.
And they let us know, I mean, even here, even up to a couple of months ago, when someone is requesting, as they're walking and utilizing this as their neighborhood park, when there is a opportunity to put a bench in, or there is an opportunity to plant a tree, they want to do it in their neighborhood. And so we're going to have that opportunity here. And we can make this really great. It's just, also part of this process will be is that we will take a look at all of the parcels and try to combine as many into one as possible. Right now, there is up to, I believe, 11 or so. There's a lot. So it's wonderful, but we'll wait till we receive that as a city.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman, for letting me
Thank y'all
come
so
before
much.
you. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. I will be back and share the master plan. But
Exciting.
I would request some type of, even if it's not an official, just a nod to where you feel like that this is where we're in the right direction. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you
Appreciate
so
your time.
much.
Thanks for
Appreciate
all
it.
you do.
Okay, item number 7 here, discussion of demolition and reconstruction on a principal structure at 309 Adams Street. Mr. McCreary. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
All right, so Ben McCrary, Chisel Workshop, turn it on. I'll try to be that, but Ben McCrary, Chisel Workshop. All right, I am just going to read this little thing. It'll be quick. I promise it won't be super boring, so you can have it. Quick update. All right, so we're talking about 1309 Adams Street, contributing structure in the Adams Street Historic District. And from the outset, our goal has been to preserve the character of the property and maintain its contribution to the historic streetscape, particularly along the front elevation. We initially pursued a path of stabilization and rehabilitation. However, after some selective demolition and detailed evaluation by both the structural engineer and an experienced historic contractor, we believe that approach is not feasible. From the engineer's standpoint, he thinks that the building is really remaining standing by sheer force of habit, is what he told us. The structure lacks a continuous functional load path from the roof to the foundation. The foundation itself is non-continuous and likely without proper footings, and there are no mechanical connections between the framing and the foundation. Portions of the wall framing along the right side are so severely deteriorated that at least in one section you can push it and actually move the whole wall in and out from interior to exterior. In their analysis, to bring the structure into compliance with current code, the engineer estimates that approximately 60 to 70% of the structural elements will need to be replaced or reinforced. And when considering that standpoint and the need to excavate below the structure to install a new foundation, the contractors really determined that it's basically virtually all the structural components will have to be removed and replaced to do that, because really nothing is there to hold together. So considering this information, the process of stabilization becomes functionally equivalent to reconstruction with limited salvaging of historic material. Aesthetically, the exterior's already been significantly altered. It's covered in vinyl siding, as you've seen before, and we've shown also that along the front facade, the main gable has been, all the existing material has been removed. It's got modern sheathing on it as well at that point. The front porch was enclosed at some point, and then only one of the front two windows actually maintains the wavy glass. The other one has got replacement glazing in it. That's more modern. And very few of the existing trim elements remain. During this process, the contractor provided an analysis of pricing, and they're estimating that the premium to basically just stabilize the structure is approximately $160,000, with no guarantee of success due to the deterioration of the structure. That, combined with the extent of material replacement, represents a substantial hardship to the owners with limited preservation benefit. So based on this, we are proposing to demolish the structure and reconstruct a residence that closely reflects the historic character, with particular focus on restoring the front elevation, including historically appropriate siding, trim, and reestablishment of the historic front porch. Our intent is to ensure this property continues to contribute to the historic district in a meaningful and durable way. That is all I've got.
Okay. All right, let's hear from Elizabeth, please.
Thank you, and thank you for returning and providing some additional information that's been requested in previous meetings. So as noted, this building is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and is contributing to the district. So for demolition criterion, the Historic Zoning Commission needs to deem one or more of the following conditions met. Either the building has lost its architectural or historical integrity, if its denial of demolition will result in unreasonable economic hardship on the applicant, as determined by the Historic Zoning Commission, and if the structural instability or deterioration of the property is demonstrated through a report by the structural engineer's report, and the report details physical condition, reasons why rehabilitation is not feasible, and cost estimates. So as based on previous feedback as well, based on the scope of work, the historic guidelines, historic building guidelines, and in addition to historic building guidelines, will be applied to ensure that the building is reconstructed to a standard that is most similar to what is existing of a historic building there today. If you all still find that as the correct guidelines to apply, we'll continue to receive that feedback. So for the consideration of demolition, it's noted in the demolition report a request as loss of historic integrity and economic hardship. As the building is listed on the National Register in its existing condition and maintains the features listed within the National Register, the loss of historic integrity does not appear to be met. Additional information is needed for a consideration of economic hardship as outlined in the guidelines. Some information has been provided for the criterion for loss of structural integrity and deterioration of the property, but additional information, such as a cost estimate for full rehabilitation of the structure compared to new construction, would be needed to be included for that consideration. A cost estimate for stabilization of the building has been included for the amount of $160,000. However, the criteria would require the cost estimate for rehabilitation as well and new construction. So the structural engineer's report has been included there, so some information has been provided for that criterion consideration. But the other two have not been, the criterion consideration information has not been included for that, that staff would deem appropriate. So for the proposed future action of the site and new construction, feedback has been incorporated into the plans for that. And the as-built have been provided to document what is existing. So a few elements to note: the building is going to be built in its current existing location, so it's no longer shifting a few feet. There are alterations to the existing building, such as removing the enclosed front porch. There is no historic documentation of what that looked like, so feedback from the commission as to how that would be reconstructed without documentation would be appreciated, as adding additional details that weren't there would not be supported by the guidelines, so as not to ornament it more than it was. The side porch is still protruding past the front facade of the building, so additional feedback about the visibility of this element would be appreciated. The height of the building appears to have grown about 4 inches on the details for this on the front of the building. They seem to maintain the same appearance as what is existing, so understanding if that is appropriate for the reconstruction. The dormer element has changed a little bit based on previous feedback, but still does not align with the guidelines for a dormer. For the roof configurations, alterations are proposed to the roof form and pitch at the rear of the building, but the front of the building appears to maintain the historic form and pitches. So feedback about how the change in roof form as it goes to the rear of the building and to the new addition, it's creating a somewhat more complex form than what is seen there today. So feedback on if that is appropriate as it extends to the back. Windows and doors, a number of new openings are proposed on the historic portion of the building, as well as the pattern that you see on the proposed addition at the rear. There's been feedback and discussion about the transparency of the rear facade and the amount of openings on the back. There's a little more flexibility with windows on rear facades, And they have changed those to better align with the guidelines of being double hung and having spacing and mullions between them. So as we move along to materials and exterior finishes, some additional information is needed to understand the proposed 5-inch reveal, if that aligns with any siding that might be underneath the building or aligns with the aluminum siding. Just some additional information about what's existing there today would be appropriate to include in the applications, as well as any other materials and finishes such as gutters, downspouts, things like that that are proposed to align with the age and style of the building. For the size, it appears that the addition does meet the size requirements for an addition to a historic building. So the addition appears to be about 887 square feet, somewhere around there, but some additional clarification is needed on the patio and porch square footages that were included there, if they're in where those are divided, just to make sure that we get everything under roof. And then for the form of the addition to the historic building, feedback would be appreciated if that is clearly inset and clearly identifiable from what the historic building was previously there. So there's a lot to unpack there. I'm happy to provide any clarification to any of the comments made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk about demolition first, and then we'll talk about a new house. Brian?
I want to hear from staff. So you said what condition of demolition is met?
So one has not been met,
So
but
two have and one has not.
no, none have been met yet.
Okay.
So loss of historical integrity it does not appear to be met, as the listing in the National Register and what is existing are the same. So it is listed as contributing in the form that it is in. So National Register, they deemed that as historic, and so it maintains that integrity as what's in the listing. The economic hardship has a list of criterion that additional comments and guidelines that need to be supported with documentation and elements like that. They have supplemented information for the loss of structural instability and deterioration of the property. So that one just requires the structural engineer's report and a report on the feasibility and cost estimates for rehabilitation versus new construction. So that one has been, information has partially been submitted for that one that could be supported by the guidelines if additional information is provided to review.
Okay, thank you.
So I think documented in the demolition request, perhaps the title, economic hardship that they've entitled there would better align with the loss of structural integrity instead.
I read I guess the engineer's report on that. Several things I wanted to just bring out is that most historic homes in Franklin of this type and age are probably sitting almost on the ground, almost between 12 and 24 inches. I mean, that's just how they built them, and they are not connected to the foundation like we do today. So I just kind of wanted to bring some distinctions that there are plenty of historic structures who have that condition that that don't need to be torn down. So, I mean, that was one of the things that they talked about. Another is there's probably not a historic structure in this town that has not had termite damage or post-beetle damage or some type of rot, dry rot, and all of that in seals. They've all been repaired. So I just want to kind of just bring that out, that all those conditions are not conditions just in and of itself of tearing down an old house. So, but what we've been shown are a house that's had all the lath and plaster removed, all the drywall removed. We've seen the flooring, the actual floorboards removed, so we're seeing what the actual joists look like and the seals. And I mean, there's no doubt this house has had a lot of damage. So, I mean, our question is this kind of damage that we're seeing, the kind of damage that we would say, yes, this structure needs to be demolished? Or do we say, it can be repaired? Now, we know it can be repaired, and we've seen some of the cost estimates. But, are those trade-offs, is it worth the repair? So I'm just, I'm still just kind of in this place, just learning more and listening. So that's why I bring up these questions.
Yeah, I think we've had some discussions in the past where if everything can be repaired, but if everything's repaired, does it just become a new house? And that's kind of where that line, it's like, well, it's really difficult to define where you go, well, there's nothing old about this. Everything had to be replaced, and it looks like it did, but it's new. And I think that's what the architect has described as kind of the position they found themselves in, is like, well, what are we going to save? And I think we've got these three criteria thing. The historic integrity, you spoke to that a little bit. We granted a demolition last week under historic integrity, but there was no semblance of what was supposed to be there 50 years ago. Like nothing. It just looked at it and you go, it doesn't look anything like it. So much so that we weren't even sure they were the same buildings anymore. That's what we kind of consider historic integrity loss, right? Whereas this, you look at it and you go, yeah, that's definitely an old house. Is it in good shape? No. But it's definitely an old house. I think there's the distinction there. And then the economic hardship, loss of structural integrity. I think like they said, they provided some data there, but it's very specific about, I think Mr. Lee provided an estimate for stabilization, but I don't know that the word stabilization makes me think like, oh, me and my family be ready to move in this thing. Because I've seen it, and I'm not sure $160,000 gets you to move-in ready. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, that's
just
the
holding it,
premium,
keeping it in place.
Just to keep it from falling over so we can actually do a renovation or addition. That's
Yeah.
separate from any of the actual work that would make it livable.
Yeah. And so our loss of structural integrity guidelines outline, hey, include that 160 grand, but what's it going to cost to turn this into something somebody can move into versus reconstructing this house exactly like it is, not with the addition, just what does it look like? And I think we'll figure out that, those costs are probably pretty close because there's not a whole lot to keep. But I think that's what the guidelines talk about. So if you can do that cost analysis in kind of a written format that we can look at it and say, to turn this as it sits into a house that somebody can move into, is safe, meets codes, has the blessing from codes signed off, UNO ready, and then to build something new, UNO ready. What are those costs? I think that would be the information that the guidelines specifically ask for.
Sure, we can do that. I think what we did was we kind of said the baseline, once you get the building stabilized, the cost between the two becomes the same. Really, the difference is the cost of stabilization, the premium that's involved in that because of just the sheer amount of manpower and labor and time that is involved with, if you're getting in there, because the way the building code reads, because we're doing so much work to this house, it pushes us into a level 3 alteration of an existing building, which essentially requires us to bring it up to current building code. If you look in here, there's really no structure holding together a floor system we can save or anything like that. So we're having to, dig out by hand you can't bring equipment into the house. You can't do the kind of heavy earthwork that you would do if it was a blank slate that you could do, right? You're having to do this stuff inside an existing structure.
Right. Okay.
So.
And it would have to do with codes. Because, we had a case where someone had removed so many load-bearing walls that codes said to us, no, they have to remove their entire roof and rebuild it.
Yeah.
And it's because they had opened it all up and removed. So you've opened it all up too. I mean, so you're right. Codes is going to require more in this instance. So it puts more burden on on maybe allowing demolition. I don't know, that's hard for me to say, where old houses are concerned. But I realize sometimes it has to happen.
Sure.
But it is going to be expensive to bring it up to code.
Sure.
I'd
Yes,
like to
sir.
say one thing. We did a project last year on First Avenue and First Avenue South and Church Street. And that house was in similar condition to this, but this one's way worse. So we had to work within that house. The framing was 80% bad, the foundation was bad, and we brought it back. And the owner was willing to pay the cost, so we didn't bring it here. And it was such in the epicenter of town, we would have never sold, tearing it down anyway. This, I have a little bit of our company has a reputation, if you don't want to tear it down, you call us. And we were in this one with the structural engineer and Ben, and they're like, I can tell you this, that the termite damage is 95%. I've never seen any, and Mary and I worked to bring back the African Heritage Museum. Yeah, the Macklemore House, and that was another one that we basically had to build a new house inside the frame, but we wanted to do that because that house was such a contributing property. This house it's almost like it's so beyond saving that's why we're here. Because I started out on the path to try to save this one. That's why we did all this demolition, because we were going there. And the architect and the structural engineer said, Mike, this one's not savable. And I just wanted to say that, Mike.
Thank you for those comments.
Do you
Mary.
know the history on this house?
I just know a little bit about the Gosse's had it, but that's about it.
That's all I know too. Was it built, I don't know, by an African-American family or not? I don't know either. But, and I hate tearing them down. But you feel like even the original little cottage, if you tore everything else, it's,
I salvaged an office for myself on my property, and it had been an old bakery. And I thought, well, I'm going to restore it, and the way it was. And by the time I was done, I'd saved 6 rafters. And that was all I managed to save for the whole property. And this is similar. We went out and looked at that garage at Jasmine Hall. It's very similar, Jasmine Grove. It's very similar. There's nothing left to work with. There's nothing there. I mean, we can say we're going to save it, but by the time we're done, it's going to be replaced because there's nothing to save. We're too late.
and the other thing that I was wondering about, that we quote, don't know what the front of the house looked like. But if we do approve demolition, if you took that front off carefully, I think you'd learn quite a bit what it would look like. Is that true?
We've already done that, actually. So
You've done-
and we have pictures in here that we can see where the old
That's
porch
what I
structure
thought,
was
okay.
because the studs change, right? You've got
Right.
the true 2x4 rough cut, and then you've got more modern studs right next to it.
So how you're envisioning the porch
Yes.
is most likely how it was?
Yeah, and the Sanborn maps actually show
Show.
that porch.
Okay.
And you can see that,
You can see
design
it.
all over town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a
Replicated.
common design.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Deep sympathy, because we all know Chisel is all about fixing it right. You've opened up a can of worms. And you've documented it quite well too, I think, but how does this affect its standing on a National Historical Register? If, let's say, we approve demolition, if you add the addition to somewhat of what is the existing home, kind of give nod to that, still get the square footage that you want to get on the new addition part or the new build, how does that, does National Register, take you off the register?
Yes. I mean, if they resurvey it, they do.
And I'm
The
wondering
likely-
too, if
yeah.
National Register has some type of a position for homes in this position that are beyond repair, that can give us some guidance, because that would ease my mind to see if there's a different standing for homes that fall in this category, because there's got to be a lot of them. There's got to be.
But don't we have that guidance already? It's in the 3 criteria.
No, I'm looking at, yes, that's true, to meet that would approve demolition or give the blessing on demolition. But is there another standard for the historic, for it to still be on the historical register with some type of caveat that this was not able to be salvaged, but this is the best of what we did? And, you know, we've met all the other criteria for demolition, but I'm just wondering, are you on
You're
historic
off.
register or off?
Off. And if this were updated, you tell me if you think I'm wrong, this would be considered a non-intrusive property to the National Register. It had aluminum siding, is that right? So I'm actually sort of surprised they,
Kept it on
I
to
don't
originally.
agree with this standard, but generally, if it has aluminum siding, they don't list it as.
Or vinyl, yeah.
Yeah, or as contributing, but this one
Yeah.
was, so I wonder if there was some history about it that made it
Yeah,
contributing.
yeah, uniquely special. Did you have something, Elizabeth? Go ahead.
Just wanted to provide information that was provided to us by the State Historic Preservation Office on another project in which demolition was considered. So in cases kind of similar to this, if full-scale in-kind replacement is something that is needed, it would have to take place part by part. So you couldn't have all the walls down at once. That is considered demolition. So once all the walls are removed or no longer on site, that is a demolition. So I think based on the detailed information on past applications with this, one wall wouldn't really even be remaining because they would have to replace everything there, remove it to work on foundation work and things like that. So then it would be considered demolition because all walls would be removed.
We have that example right on Columbia.
It's basically what they made us do.
Shell of the shell.
Yeah.
Well, I have to agree with Tyler on the thing that, that once you replace everything in an old house like that, it's no longer
Right.
historic.
Yeah.
And it's, it is a new house. So I don't know that I want to get into that part of it, just leaving a wall somewhere.
I think that was the original scheme, was we're going to try and keep the front wall because I'm assuming the applicant thought that they probably wouldn't get a demolition request granted. And that was a way to take down as much as you could, but found out that that wasn't worth trying to keep either.
Sure.
Yeah.
To that, is there anything like that worth saving? I mean, is there a portion of a wall or, anything you could incorporate in that would be worth saving?
It's really hard to tell. I mean, the extent, really, termite damage is on every single structural member that's in there. So the roof is completely deteriorated, it's sagging, so that's gonna have to go. We've talked about one of the walls on the right side is basically able to fall down right now. There's just so little left
In it,
that it won't hold itself together in its current, if we try to do what we're talking about.
yeah.
Because, right, the floor structure's gone, because what's in there now in the front of it was put in, because the house was condemned, I think, in 2023, maybe, something like that. And the owner, I guess they couldn't sell it, couldn't do the other demolitions, so they came in and did this piecemeal thing where they basically took out the existing floor and put in 2x12s that are pressure treated, but they're not connected to the perimeter. So it's just like this thing. So I'm just trying to, try to pick that up or try to stabilize that where you do something underneath it, it's just gonna like crumble apart and just, we're just very concerned that if we go down that path, there is no certainty that the building will stay together and there's very little. So that's why we're saying, let's salvage what we can, detailing, we know some detailing, things like that, some of the windows, at least the one window that's, both of the windows are historic in the front. Only one has original glazing left in it. But we're still planning to keep both the windows and rehabilitate them and reuse them. And then the form is really what's left. When you read the document from 2000, which is when it went into the Historic Register, if you read 1309 Adams Street and then you compare it to the house right across the street that is basically the same house, it's comical really why it's listed, right? It's a one-story asphalt shingle. If this is 1309, the house is a gable asphalt shingle roof, interior brick chimney, and exterior vinyl siding. The main facade has a single bay entry porch with square wood posts, railing, and a decorative valance. Brackets are under the gable eaves, and the main entrance has a solid wood door, right? And then 1312 is a frame construction with hipped asphalt shingle roof, weatherboard siding, interior brick chimney, and a stone foundation. The main facade has a partial width porch with milled wood posts and valance. The main entrance is an original single light glass and wood door, a single light transom. And the gable field on the main facade is an elliptical attic window. Gables have brackets at the eaves and decorative vegetable. So that, that house has what she should be, right? And at the time, even when this went into the historic register, it was significantly altered from what its historic form would have been. And there was very little left of what's historic at that point in time. So,
And it's been on a demolition by neglect journey for 20 years, I would say.
yeah, it is unfortunate. Like Michael said, it's just, we would love to save it. We're kind of late to the party. It's just been a long time where no one has cared about this house and let it deteriorate. And so we are just concerned that we won't be able to, even if we tried, that there'll be very little left or it will actually fall apart through the construction process.
Okay. Well, the best guidance we can give you on that is try and, with staff's kind of guidance, firm up your submission for that loss of structural integrity. It sounds like you have access to all the pieces to submit, so I would do that. Let's talk about the proposal here. Staff had mentioned a few things.
I do have one thing about what staff comments, kind of headed
Yep,
off at the
go ahead.
pass, talking about the side porch. Really, the only thing that extends beyond the wall is the eave.
Right.
And it actually lines up, it doesn't extend beyond the other eaves. So kind of the house, the form before had a higher roof and a lower roof. The eaves extended the same amount on either one. So that's kind of still what we're seeing from the front. Like you can see in this bottom left
Little
image,
tail
on the
sticking
right
out.
side.
Yeah. I think that's what y'all were mentioning specifically, is that roof pokes out a little bit. You're saying there is a roof that pokes out
You can see it
already?
in that image, the top image of that from existing, if you kind of zoomed in on
Okay,
that
the addition
one.
back there. Okay.
Yeah,
Any thoughts on that? Anybody?
yeah.
I just want to clarify, is that the porch on the side that just has like a little awning?
Yeah, like a
and it's got-
canopy.
You got windows on each side of the door?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I don't hardly call that a porch.
It's really not. It's kind of just a roof overhang.
A little stoop area.
Any other thoughts on that? It sounds like just a little more clarification on the size for staff. There was some question there, but it sounded like there was a number provided. Let's go to the other side. There was some talk of 2 windows versus 3 on the kitchen. That's the
Mhm.
kitchen?
Correct.
And what did we decide there or talked about?
Last time, my recollection was that no one really had a preference.
Okay.
Either way
It was-
worked,
it
and
was
so
pretty
that's
far
why
back.
we took away the 2 and left the 3.
And it looks like you've
So-
clipped back the roof on the dormer and pulled the wall in just a little for,
We did, and
the
if you,
fore-haft.
I think some of the questions were wanting to understand how far that gable or that dormer sat on the roof, and if you look at the plan, it's about 13 feet in from the edge. And we tried to kind of step it to make it seem a little smaller. We squeezed it in even more and things like that, and so then we tried to add some additional 3D perspective to kind of
Okay.
see how far back it is. So it's that kind of middle right image, that it's way pulled back, kind of from
okay.
the left
Any
side.
thoughts on that? Mary, do you want? Look like you're reaching for your button.
Well, is it possible to blow up the original house a minute on that side. You've got it
That
pictured at the
picture
bottom.
that's on the bottom, yeah, on that same page. Right. Internet.
Okay.
The
That's
actual
good.
photo and that, yeah. You're wondering how much we can actually see from the road.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where, and I think that's where our comments were surrounded before was how much of this is visible.
I mean, we tried to show the most extreme to kind of
Mhm.
say that if you were ever going to see it, this is where you would see it, and you would see it for just that one split second as you're moving past it, right? But there's vegetation and just, you know, other things on the street that are, it's not like it's out here in the middle of a field kind of all on its own. So we feel that it is very, you know, the view of it will be so minimal that most people probably will never, ever notice it. You would have to be very much focused on the house, looking for that thing to really ever see it. We tried, our intent was to make it as minimal and unobtrusive as possible.
Okay.
I know we spoke about bringing it back so it wasn't as long. But I noticed it's still as long as it was before. So there's no way to tuck it back further?
It's the question of it, if we keep pulling it back, there's no space up there anymore, I guess, that's the balance we're trying to make here, is that can we provide something that maintains the historic integrity and character of the house while providing additional usable space where there was none before, which makes part of this project feasible and desirable for the owner.
And it's a stretch, architecturally, it's a stretch for this style of house to have a dormer in that location like that. So, I mean, that's part of it too. And you've already got a lot of square footage downstairs. I mean, it looks to me like, for the sake of the character of the house and the neighborhood, to remove that space where it is and let the house, you know, take its form that it would normally have.
I do appreciate that. I think part of it is that because it's, you know, we're making these modifications to it, and it's on the back in a location where really no one will see it except perhaps the neighbor when they're in their backyard, given the size of the lot and the kind of exclusion of the house. Is it really detracting from the, you know, the overall historic character of the house and the character of the community by doing this dormer? And we would argue, we don't think so. We think that we've kind of hidden it away well enough that it's really not, no one really sees it except one person, or, you know, you can only see it from a very limited place, and really that's not from the public view. But I hear your point, but that's our alternative to that, is we're, you know, trying to meet needs of a particular program and be mindful and sensitive to both.
Anybody else have thoughts on that dormer? Holly?
Yeah, I think given the location of it and how much you really can't see it, I don't think it makes a ton of sense to take away a lot of usability from the person for something that people aren't going to see. I don't think it looks really out of place, especially in context. That's just my thoughts.
Okay. Anybody else? I don't. Go ahead, Kathy.
You know, when I look at the elevations and look at that dormer, whatever it is, dormer-esque, what sheet is that? There we go. It's sheet A201, I think. Yeah, A201. Yeah, it looks extremely long, but we all know, you know, elevations aren't how they appear when you're standing on the ground looking at it in the real. So I think if we differentiated somewhat with braking and maybe pulling something in or out a little bit more, that might ease a little bit of that coming around the front corner of the front elevation. So what you see in the image that you have, that picture of the existing house, at the bottom on that sheet, that can maybe ease it. And maybe if it, is that, you need that height of the dormer?
We
It's
do.
right on the ridge line.
It is, there's not a lot of height in there, so that is, let's see, I think we have a section. Might not have included it in this one. But really, I think it's around 6 feet is the height of the dormer from the floor on that area, and then it slopes up,
Okay.
or maybe 6, 7, something like that. It's not a lot, it's very.
I was just saying,
minimal.
if that dropped a little lower than the ridge on the front elevation, does it?
I think it's below the ridge, isn't it?
It
It is below the ridge.
Just a little, which
Yeah,
is,
it's about
yeah.
5 or 6 inches below the ridge.
What is that roof pitch?
It is 2 and 12. We anticipated metal.
So that would be my next question. What's the color of the metal proposed to be?
Ooh, we haven't gotten that far. I will pick something that is very complementary to the house and consistent with the historic character.
Well, I was trying to make it, if it is approved, I was trying to make it disappear. And if it were copper or red or some other color that didn't blend with the asphalt
Sure,
shingles,
sure.
I mean, it would really stick out.
No, we would not.
So I mean, that's why I
propose
bring that part up too.
I appreciate that, and we would definitely want to make
What-
it consistent with the other roofing materials.
What I think exaggerates this addition, if you go back and look at that long run of roof with no breaks, to me, that exaggerates the dormer and gives it more of like a house that would be built on a narrow lot.
I think
That is what I wish you could work with a bit more. I think it's not letting you read the original structure separately.
I don't, I don't think the dormer bothers me really at all. I mean, I'm probably different than everybody else, but this is a scheme I've seen and even done on lots and lots and lots of projects, and even tied it in. You know, we call it this trabeated dormer that kind of runs into another roof line, and it's, you know, I think if it were further out and not that 13 feet back, it'd be like, oh, this is like really going to be kind of in your face. But I can't imagine anybody's ever going to see this. And then that section between kind of the dormer and the cross gable, it is long, but it looks like you've got two different pitches on that side. So it's going to be a lower slope, then jump up. So it's, you know, that's a roof form we see on this type of house. I mean, the original house had that roof line on the front. The exact same thing.
To me, this style of house is generally added onto in pieces, and this does not read as pieces.
Zoom out just a little bit.
It reads as,
So what I read is you've got the original T up front, and then you've got a connecting piece that would have been added on. They would have come out the back with a gable, which is what they have. And then they add a cross gable, which is another piece. So it's in a whole bunch of pieces.
but that one,
The middle
the
bridge,
roof, how long a run is that?
it's
on
not
that
wider
side?
than the front elevation. It's the exact same
No,
pitch.
no,
And
the length is what I'm talking
the
about.
length is no deeper than it is wide across the front. So if you don't like
I
that
can't
length,
seem to
then you
say what I'm
probably
saying.
wouldn't like the front elevation either. It's the same amount of roof.
That's not what I'm saying.
It's this roof right here.
Right.
Yes, that
And
is the
that,
same length as that.
that looks, this way, it looks forgiving. When you
Mm-hmm.
look at the other section of it, you see a very, I don't know how long it is, the roof.
Do you still feel the same way when you see it in perspective rather than 2D elevation?
That's what she's looking at, the perspective.
When you show the perspective.
And Mary, I understand what you're saying, because it's hard to know what the roof does in this 2D
Yeah,
version.
maybe that's it.
It's got two pitches on that one side.
Maybe.
So it's shallow, and I like that it's a shallow pitch. So this
Mhm.
upper
I did-
right-hand
yeah.
picture is a real shallow roof,
Okay.
so there's not a lot of mass. And then it does kick up on the other side to meet a steeper pitch on the other side.
And sometimes those perspective drawings.
Or, I know, that's what I'm hoping.
Depending on where you take that vantage point.
That's what I'm hoping.
Picture of the existing house at the bottom.
I see it.
And compare that to the drawing right across it. That's a real good feel for how the pictures are gonna feel.
And,
The other ones are more closer and more.
yeah, and I think part of this too is, imagine if that connecting bridge wasn't there and that back crossing gable were even closer up to the original gable.
Okay.
We'd go, you've got some competition now.
Yeah.
In being that there's some separation there and some setbacks or step backs, you're creating some form separation between the two gables. So even though the rear gable is pretty big, even in comparison to the original, it is foreshortening in a way that helps it not read so big. So I think there's a lot of good things about this. The dormer, like I said, I wish it could be tucked in so you could just say it is not visible from any vantage point from the public. But I understand it just doesn't.
That's the perspective, the one that
That's
concerns me.
yes, that's a straight on. That's an elevation view. So it doesn't foreshorten like this does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, staff had asked that we comment on how the rest of the structures it moves back relates to the front in height and scale and all that. And maybe you're talking about that some in that back gable. I think it's successful in the way it does.
Yeah, I think it steps back. That new kitchen addition there is shorter than the front, which is good. I think just the bearing height of the old house is just taller, right? It's got taller ceilings and, so.
And on the opposite side, where you do have that side porch, I've seen that
Stoop, right?
many times, here in Franklin, in that look with the two windows on each side. So I think that's a nice touch.
Yes.
I think that kind of contemporary interpretation of that enclosed porch on the back is nice. The other part where there's a little more siding and wall is a lot of opening, but it's on the back if that's what the homeowners want. I wish that elevation, that end gable, had some openings on it, even if they were shuttered or something.
Sure.
A lot of jurisdictions would force you to do that because they go, you can't have a whole mass with no openings on it. It just wouldn't be seen. And even little things like decorative vents or whatever things go on houses that create some fenestration on that little side gable would be. But those are the only comments there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Something that mimics like original venting.
Okay.
West Haven to me, but
This
I
back
hope
part.
where it, the run of the roof on the part that's being reconstructed compared to the run of the roof on the back.
That's all, I'm going to say original, but
But I
that
may
long
be
chunk of
looking
roof
at
in the
it
front's what sits there today, right? Or some version of that, same
Because
length.
We have, so that is what is the existing building today. The building, the two gables right now.
Right.
Is that full length.
Right.
There is a taller portion and a shorter portion currently.
Okay.
We are proposing to make it one
Okay.
taller portion.
And that's
Where that length is coming from.
that's where my concern is. That it not read like a house built on a skinny lot in West Haven or, where they have the historic front look.
Sure.
And then a long run. That is, if there were, I'm not arguing with the size of it, just some way to break up the massing.
But that one long elevation is existing right now, right? The wall is continuously that long. It's just
Okay.
the roof that changes currently. So if you were to,
Okay.
I think that matters, though, that there's two different heights now. I mean, if we're saying we're gonna
Yeah. And
use
I-
the existing house
it may
guidelines,
be
we
the
wouldn't let
computer
you
drawing
adjust
that-
that. And it would step, and we would expect it to step again, but that may not help your upstairs. Yeah,
That looks,
yeah.
Quick question on the rear elevation, where you have all the windows. What's the height of the pair of doors?
I believe we made it 6'8" because I think we had previous conversations where 8.0 was not preferred. We had transoms at one point and things
Right.
like that, and
it looks good.
we kind of brought everything to a 6'8" datum.
You need something in the gable, but other than that.
Yeah, it's looking heavy on the
Like some
forehead.
detailing. 'cause I
Well,
know
it could just be a
windows
decorative vent or
Yeah.
a little window or something.
Little window.
Just a little like 4 light,
I wouldn't argue with that.
little window.
Yeah.
We kind of shied
Be-
away from that based on previous
Not a
feedback.
transom, just a
Yeah.
Single.
window.
Single window.
And that's, not all houses had that, but this has got some, you're trying to get some ceiling height. So there's
Yeah.
there's like 2 feet of extra siding in that whole thing that's like, it's just enough that it needs something in it now.
I mean, we're actually vaulting the ceiling in there is the plan, so we would
That'd
love
be
to have
beautiful.
Yeah.
additional.
Yeah, it'd be nice. So on that same elevate, or little perspective, you show a differentiation in material from the siding to the smooth stuff around the windowed section.
The bump out.
Kind of enclosed porch look.
So we were kind of tracking along the idea of a conservatory orangery type of space that's kind of enclosed porch. It would have more of like raised panel siding, kind of a detail and that kind of a trim around it instead of siding.
I think it's handsome to differentiate. Again, that contributes to less massing.
I think it'll be even prettier with like a gutter profile. It gives it some cornice and all
Sure,
that with that
sure.
low slope metal roof just on that part. I mean, all that helps.
So
And
the
this
next,
is just it's a very conceptual massing model, right? We try to add detail in the elevations.
so we're just going to make a comment on staff's wanting to discuss about the reveal of the siding.
Yes.
So, I mean, most of the houses of this vintage that I have seen in Franklin, they have a reveal of 4.5 inches. So I know there was a discussion about 4.5 or 5. Well, the ones I've measured they're pretty consistent at 4.5. Now, at different times, different other eras, they can get very much wider.
There is a section, I think we can see it through the vinyl on one of the sides, where there may still be some original wood underneath there. So is it something we could have a
Yes,
language that says we'll measure it once we take it off?
that'd be great.
Okay.
Asked about the insets too, which are these kind of indents on the side. We've talked about a little bit with that kind of awning stoop. What I see looks like it's working pretty well. I think if it were a 2-story house, we might ask for more. I kind of have this thing in my head, like a 1-story addition should have like at least 1 foot, and if it's 2 stories, maybe it ought to be 2 feet. But your insets are long too. They're not like a 4-foot deep hyphen. It's
Right.
like 10, 12, 14 feet or something. So I think that's good. I don't think they were referring to insets in roofing, but that old drop in the roof made a difference. I don't know what that means for us if you can look at that, but it's just a lot of long roof now that wasn't there before. And we're trying to kind of replicate at least the front part of the house that was there, if there's some way to break it. And it may be that, I don't know, I'd love to hear your all's feedback. Maybe it breaks, but it doesn't, because it was a pretty short addition, like really short. So maybe we, as long as we can get a break and drop it a little bit, we get the roof relief, but maybe they can have the height that they're looking for and not totally destroy your upstairs plans, because I assume that's part of it.
So, okay. You don't think that would be a little distracting to have like just a tiny little, kind of like a
Well,
dollhouse?
that's the
box
way
that
it
you
is
build
now,
on?
except it's not a tiny little one. If you want to do the big one, he's like, no, I don't want to do that. If you want to do the big step,
I think if I
knock
did
yourself
that,
out.
we would lose the upstairs if we had to do.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is it's like, well, and this is, I don't think it would meet the guidelines to try and put upstairs a second floor on top of the addition, the big part of the addition, because I think it's going to turn into mass that we can't hide. We can hide that dormer pretty well. And so that's working, but all the dormer's all predicated on you being able to raise that portion of roof too. So
I mean, it is also a very long linear lot. It's not a super wide lot, but it's very deep.
Yeah.
So, something to consider, maybe the house in proportion to the lot.
To me, this side of the house is more successful than the other side.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you on the other side. So you see how you have, where the roof drops below the main house roof. On the other side, because I'm just looking at that 2D image, does it just run into the roof? It doesn't actually, you can't tell that from one roof to the other, it doesn't drop below it, it actually is in line with it?
You're talking about where the kind
Where
of
the
break
dormer
is between.
Where the dormer.
Where the dormer is.
Is that one plane from,
The roof of the dormer?
I guess, from here all the way through here? Is that just one plane of roof? You don't see the offset that you see on the other side.
Right, there will, yes, that whole lower dormer, or lower roof that's at 312, I think, is kind of consistent from the original house to that smaller dormer above the kitchen, smaller gable at the kitchen, sorry.
But on the other side, you see that offset. What I'm saying is that, if you have your original gable, the taller gable, the shorter gable nests usually underneath.
Mhm.
And what I'm asking is, it kind of been pushed to the side so that one side nests underneath, but the other side is in line with that roof. Is that what I'm seeing? It's hard for me to.
I'm trying to follow, but I don't think I am.
Okay, so you have your one gable like
The
this.
big main front
And
gable?
if you were to come under it with another gable right in the center,
Mhm.
then when you looked at both roof lines, this roof line would terminate the taller one, and then you'd see the lower one right beneath it.
Mhm.
So it looks like that's what I'm seeing on one side. But on the other side, it looks like that roof just continues.
Well, look at the roof plan, maybe that.
Yeah, so
will
just gonna say, let's
help
go to the
us.
roof plan.
So.
It does. A104.
Part of it's like a funky,
And tell me if can you zoom in on just the roof plan, Emily? We've got both pictures up here. All right. So go right behind the dormer, there's like a grayed out shadow area. That line to the left is not there, right?
right, that line that you just hovered over doesn't actually,
See the gray shadow? Right there.
yeah.
That line, stop your mouse. Go back to the left, right there. That line does not exist. So Brian, what I'm reading is you've got the T, the original T, that's part of it. And then this side over here, like you're saying, is a low shed that comes underneath, but then it hits, this low shed comes up and hits this steeper peak, which is
Okay.
the same. This is contiguous all the way through here, all the way to the addition.
Okay. It's got more of that salt box kind of come down.
It does.
Yes.
So if there were a section through here, it'd be steep pitch, a little piece of steep pitch,
Yep.
and then a shed. It
changes its
salt
angle.
boxes
You can kind of
this
look at
way.
the 3D image on 203, the bottom
But that
right-
line's not
bottom
supposed to
one-
be there.
bottom
It's
right
just
one,
a
sorry.
Revit
You
booger.
zoom in on that back piece,
It's like
bottom right
this.
of the last page, yeah. And zoom in kind of right where your cursor is.
Kind of see it better there.
And so in that instance, because it does shed and change angles, it does continue on that angle to the back.
It just kind of does that.
Yeah, so where they hit like this, it just keeps going, yeah.
And this is labeled, the roof pitch is labeled 912, but it's 312. It's labeled 312 on part of it, 912 on the other. But it's 3 to a 9.
Mm-hmm.
If you zoom up
Oh,
right
it
there.
is 912, I do apologize, yep.
Yeah, I think we get, okay. I don't mind the roof form. I think it's simpler than it comes off. You got two crossing gables and you got a bridge between, and the bridge is longer on one side than the other. But I think some of those, the other things that'll help the massing are some of these opening things that we talked about. Even some cornice with gutters is going to help bring a level of detail to it. That's like, oh, it starts to look a little softer and livable.
They are. You'd think the program would be smart enough to figure it out. Sometimes not.
Yeah, any more evidence of porch stuff you find? I know you're just kind of getting there, but like if you find a porch rack or any trim that was left on a porch rack, it's probably not there, but
Yeah.
if you find something, or even the silhouette of where a porch rack went into the side wall, it's like, oh, well, at least we know
Well,
a profile that we could
yeah.
come up with.
I was hoping that it was that kind of detail that's on the existing front little porch bump out. I was hoping we were thinking that's what was there before, and they just kind of put it on the bump out instead, because it does make sense with the other style of homes in the area.
Look like the neighbors.
So we were like,
Okay.
well, we thought about just, our plan was to take that, because none of it's long enough to use, but we would have to replicate it to
Okay.
run it as the kind of detailing of the porch.
Does it look historic? Do you
It
think it's
does.
historic?
It
Okay.
does. I don't know if you can zoom in on any of those, like the front elevation photo or something.
I wonder how old the front porch is.
Pardon? I know, but luckily it was up high, so hopefully maybe they couldn't get to it.
They usually, the new stuff, but
You can zoom in on that front elevation, just,
Are you going to do any of these rafter tail, eave detail things?
but we do have some of those left over, and we were going to replicate, salvage what's there.
Are they just going to be on the front part of the house? Or are you going to do it
I was planning
all
to
the
run
gables?
it down on the kind of the main elevation of kind of the existing, the original two cross gable.
Okay.
That was the plan.
Okay.
So that little kind of detailing above the front door on the porch, that's what we were, it has kind of, it's a little.
It's like a little turned finial
turned
thing.
things, yeah, so.
Can you zoom in on that?
Please.
Yeah.
Good manners always helps. Pretty shallow as porch racks go, but I've seen them like this where it's visually looks deeper with that kind of Victorian.
I would recommend, just look around Franklin and come up with a variation on the theme. I mean, there are a lot of scallops, you see all kind of things. And usually if you see two houses next to each other, they're not exactly the same. I mean,
Right.
they really had variation. So I think you can get some good inspiration.
Okay.
And the other thing I'd like to ask staff more about and see us discuss is about if demolition is approved. What did it mean when we were talking about considering this as historic in the guidelines versus new construction?
I think that was a question posed in a previous meeting of, in order to reconstruct a building to what would be more historic standards than new construction so that it appears more like the historic building, applying the guidelines for historic buildings. So as for like materials, new construction, you can use cementitious lap siding or wood siding, but for historic residential buildings, we would recommend wood siding, not cementitious lap siding. So it's kind of the small details of materials and things like that that would be more genuine to the historic building if the historic residential building guidelines were applied to it instead of new construction.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
And I don't know what all, I think we've said that, but I'm not sure I'm clear on all the implications. We may not know until we get there, but I'm thinking things like wood windows, whereas composite windows would be allowed on additions or new construction. I'm like, well, I think wood siding and wood windows, especially for the front half of the house, just those kind of considerations that if we're calling this a reconstruction, are we, first of all? And second, are those kind of the standards we want to hold to make us feel comfortable that, yes, we don't love demoing this house, but we're getting something back that nods to it, I think is important
Yeah, and I
from
think
our standpoint.
we would be okay with that. It would be just, we would love to know how we should approach that, like how we need to write it into whatever approval document happens. I mean, we
Yeah.
anticipated wood siding and wood windows.
Yeah. I think it's a lot of notes and things. You may have to work with staff on go through each section of those existing renovation guidelines and just go, okay, it recommends wood windows. We're going to do that. Wood siding. We're going to do that. All those kind of bullet points that are in there. Just try and satisfy those and make sure there's a note on the drawings that represents each of those. When it comes to putting in your window submittal or shop drawing, just put, whatever you're using, whether it's Pella or Michael's going to make them. Say,
Right.
These are real wood windows, and all those kind of details that I think are going to make us feel more comfortable with what's proposed, if we get that far. Anything else? Any other specific questions?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate
That's
your
a lot.
time and your information.
Thank you
Very
for
helpful.
putting together a lot of information.
Yeah.
So, okay. I think that was our last thing. There's more people out here, but I think they're hanging out with Michael. I told him to leave you here.
Aren't we all?
Okay. Staff announcements, please.
Very quick, the application deadline for the May 11th Historic Zoning Commission meeting is this Friday, April 24th. We are polling for the new historic zoning training dates, and so it'll be for late summer, early fall, and so they'll be coming to your inbox soon. And we have a special DRC meeting at 11 a.m. next Tuesday, the 28th, here at Eastern Flank for the preservation plan update. And we're going to be looking at the themes, goals, and recommendations. And so this is an opportunity to look at the drafted goals and strategies for the plan and get feedback on the direction of preservation for the city. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for those announcements. Anybody have anything else? Okay, we shall be 11 a.m. Yes, ma'am. Here, right? All right. Thank y'all very much. We shall be adjourned.